Just let us know when you're ready, Rick.
I'm ready now.
Okay. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, September 18th, 2019, and this is a regular meeting of the Montclair Zoning Board of Adjustment. Notice has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building and sending a copy to the Montclair Times, Star Ledger, and Herald News. Roll call. Mr. Harrison.
Here.
Mr. Fleischer is excused this evening. Mr. Church.
Here.
Mr. McCullough.
Here.
Mr. Moore is excused. Mr. Allen is excused. Mr. Simon.
Here.
Ms. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Caulfield.
Here.
And Mr. Sullivan.
Here.
Okay. We have the minutes of the July 17th meeting. I have a couple of changes. On page 1, you have in the approval of the June minutes, you have Mr. Reynolds abstaining when Mr. Reynolds was not there because he was no longer a member, because he defected from the township. On page 2 at the very bottom, line 38, even though we adopted the resolution, it really should say Historic Preservation Commission. And I don't know that I care, but on page 6, we keep switching between referring to them as applicants plural and applicants singular. As I said, I don't know that I really care. But maybe the easiest fix is in line 11, because most of the other places it has it as applicant. Just do it as the applicant. Any other changes to the July minutes?
Just one on page 17, line 6, where it reads that the applicant is request. The is should be deleted.
Which page number was that?
Page 7,
7.
line 6.
6. That the applicant requests. We'll take out the extra bits.
Any other changes to those minutes? If not, someone want to move their approval with the changes?
I'll move the minutes of July 17th.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any abstentions? And we have the minutes of the August 21st meeting. On line 24, just to be consistent as to how the others are done, after you do to exceed the maximum permitted height, and then put ends, well, actually a comma, C variances from minimum side yard setback, required number of parking spaces, and to allow tandem parking spaces, and then continue within site plan approval. And then on line 32, you should add at the end, Mr. Church abstained. Anyone else with any other changes to those minutes? Someone want to move approval with the changes? Someone needs to move approval with the changes,
only
whether you
Mr.
want to or
Church.
not.
I'll move approval of the minutes of August 21st with the changes.
So second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we have the resolution for the property on Holland Terrace. On page 1, on the second finding, there's a double period. And then more substantively on page 2, I think we need to add a whereas saying that they did not meet the criteria for a C2 variance, that the benefits did not outweigh the detriments. Any other changes to that resolution? Someone want to move approval with those changes?
Approval of the resolution with the changes from the chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'm abstaining on the next resolution because it's near my house.
JHU.
Are there any changes to that resolution?
I didn't see it.
Who's eligible to vote on it, Graham?
Just Mr. Caulfield and Mr. Church.
So we need a motion to adopt the resolution.
I'll make the motion to adopt the resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain. Okay, Graham, you want to announce the adjournment?
Yes, of course. This is to announce that application 2644 for property at 325 Claremont Avenue, applicant Montclair Town Center LLC, has provided a correspondence to the board notifying that notice for the application was not complete. They would like the matter to be carried to October 16th, 2019 meeting of the board, and they will redo notice for that meeting.
The first application is that of Bruce Bird for property at 10 Alexander Avenue. This is an application for a variance to construct an addition to an existing dwelling. The property is in the R1 one-family zone. Property is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 4, Block 4,805. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45C 4B to permit a maximum building width of greater than 65% of the width of the lot frontage. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Jeffrey Bird. I live at 302 21st Street in Brooklyn, New York. The address of the project is 10 Alexander Avenue in Montclair. It's my father's property. That's why the name's the same.
Okay, you want to explain what's being proposed at the property?
Sure. And just for clarity's sake, is the date on the drawing July 3rd? Or is it?
July 3rd is the one that I have.
Okay. I have a revised.
Oh, I'm sorry. There
It's
is a
revised.
subsequent revision date of September 5.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was talking about the correct drawing. Thank you. So you'd like me to continue? So what this project is my parents are aging. They would like to move a bunch of program of the house, an ad program that would help them live in the house as they grow older, namely a laundry room, a bathroom on the first floor, and a secure garage. So in order to do that, we pursued this project with the goal of minimizing the impact on the house itself. Our analysis throughout the lot illustrated that in order to get that program in, you would have to go over the bulk lot percentage. Our main goal of the project is, again, to minimize the work that we do along the facade of the house. We didn't want to do a substantial renovation or substantial alteration of the house. So this is what we developed. In light of the historical board's comments, we took many of them into account, lessened the mass, and basically proposed the minimum of what we need to get in the program that we would like.
Questions from members of the board?
Hi, Jeff. Did you explore maybe going to the back of the house, and can you talk about your exploration of that aspect of going
Yes.
to the
So
backside?
that came up during the historical board meeting. We would still need a bulk variance if we went into the back of the house. There's just not a lot of space left there. There is a small diagram illustrating that. And it would also create a massive driveway, as well as alter a substantial program of the house while the construction's going on.
I have a question. To continue with Mr. Helf's question, even just turning the garage so that the shorter side is facing the street, did you consider that? So you wouldn't have as much width?
Yes. Again, it would need a bulk variance. Basically, on the side, the eastern side where the proposal is, we have about 20 to 25 feet without a bit, as of right. That would, to adequately fit in a car, we would, again, substantially alter that facade. And turning radiuses would be rather tight.
Other questions from the members of the board?
Now, as I looked at the property, that extension is going towards the driveway. The driveway is going to remain going back to the back of the house?
No, we would remove everything that would be in the rear of the garage.
So this extension would obviate the need for going back into the driveway?
Yes. It would be all, we would most likely have a permeable area, sod or garden.
Any other questions, Mr. McCullough?
So did I understand correctly that the part of the intent was to create a bedroom on the first floor?
No. The bedroom is on the second floor. Or
Right.
It would be a half floor. Basically, the site has a, Alexander in general has a decent hill topography. So you have roughly 5 to 6 foot difference from the site. So if you were to access this garage, you'd come in basically half level from the primary floor of the existing dwelling. So the bedroom would be on the first and a half floor. Did that clarify it for you?
Well, I'm looking at the way in which this was written, and so now I think I understand what you were saying, because you described it as a first floor toilet room, a first floor laundry room, and bedroom. You didn't say a first floor bedroom.
I see. I'm sorry.
Other questions?
Yeah. I understand to do this addition, you're going to need a bulk variance. I think we're just trying to lessen the overall width of the building you're proposing. Did you consider moving the stairs so that it's kind of behind the powder room and dryer, so that you can decrease the total width of that garage? Because the stairs taking up a good portion of your addition width-wise.
So to understand this clearly, you're suggesting placing the powder room underneath the stair up?
No, so on your plan, you've got the powder room basically adjacent to the staircase, and there's a hallway that leads into the stair. Could you just put the stair above, where you have that window marked 104? If that could be the entrance to the stairway, so you can decrease the total width of the addition?
I see. It was not considered. It could be considered. Basically, wanted to give a little bit of distance off the house. But what you're saying is it'd be across from the laundry room?
Exactly, or across from the powder room.
I see. Yeah, it was mainly to give a comfortable distance off the house, primarily that bay window.
Okay. I mean, I think that's something you should consider, just from your elevations. It's, I mean, it seems like the addition is almost wider than the original house. It's a little overpowering, and it would be nice to find a way to minimize it, especially if it's not, you know, programmatically required to have stairs in that addition in this way.
I understand. Thank you.
Other questions, members of the board? I guess to follow up on what the other members have been, you know, you have an existing house that is very conforming in terms of the setbacks, and, you know, you're proposing an addition that is much wider than the existing house and is going 10 feet wider than what the ordinance permits, and it's you know, we haven't typically, or none that I can think of, granted variances from the building width relative to the lot width standard. And I guess, and and I understand you're trying to preserve the bay window, but now the bay window looks out over, the garden that's in the middle of the driveway loop, and now it's going to be looking at the side of the addition, in which, so I guess, I just see the, and I'm not sure, you said, I don't understand, and if you could explain why, if you swung the garage around, why that inherently would require any variances.
When you say swing it around, are you
So
referring?
if you put it behind the bay window and swung it so the entrance to the garage would be coming in from the side, which, you have that existing the driveway near the eastern property line should be, clearly cars would be able to swing into that without difficulty. It would appear to me that you would be able to conform to the building width requirement.
You would be able to conform with it. It'd be a tight turn, and it would also completely gut the facade.
What can you make up with your
So this, I'm gonna walk away from this element all here. What we really wanted to do, and can everyone hear me okay? Is minimize all the structural work, minimize the work done to the existing house, so we would use it through an existing window header. That way, we're not shutting down the house for 1 year of construction, as well as substantially altering the condition of all the spaces along that wall.
Okay.
But I think my question earlier was to keep the powder room laundry addition where you have it and to just turn the orientation of the garage so that as,
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I was a little bit. I saw keeping it as of right, and it would be very tight. What you're saying is have a 5-foot separation, then the garage
correct,
swung around.
but just turned, yeah. I mean, is that something you could consider or?
Yes, the orientation that way I've explored. It just, I don't know. It wasn't working. There's just a lot of tight conditions.
You mean getting the cars into the garage?
Yes, having it swing around, having the required width. Again, we'd run into the same width issues in that dimension versus along the street.
I guess I also have a question about the design of the addition. That, you have a house that clearly has a historical character to it, but the new addition doesn't seem to consistently carry that design. I mean, can you speak to that in terms of how you sort of looked at what you're proposing?
Yes. So part of it was, again, to keep the house from completely gutting it. We also didn't want to substantially alter the existing mass. So with the existing garage, we were looking at some of the houses nearby, whereas you have kind of two typologies in that neighborhood. You have post-war split-level homes, and you have barns dating around roughly the same time as this house, and they tend to have large secondary structures as well. So that's where we were going with our design intent.
But the large secondary structures are separate buildings from...
Not all in that area. There's several that
I grew
are.
up on Alexander Avenue, not very far from here, so I kind of know it well. And actually, when we were looking for a house to buy, we looked at this house, so,
Oh, wow.
you know, it's a...
That's some years.
So it, I don't know, follow up on what Mr. McCulloch was saying, was you're totally changing the look of the house. Now it is, a narrow, tall, what you see from the street, and now you're expanding it, and you have one massing on the east side where the garage and the laundry room is, and a totally different massing. And we're trying to figure out a way to get you the space you want, but either eliminate the need for variance or reduce its extent. And I guess, well, I understand, I mean, you're kind of building this as a freestanding structure that you're, with a connection, that is what you're doing. And, and I guess, it just seems there are other alternatives that you could have done it, whether it's doing the stairs in a different way, swinging it around, moving the laundry room. It just seems that there were, that there are better alternatives that would still meet all your objectives.
I mean, I agree with Mrs. Harris in terms of turning the garage, because just the simple act of turning the garage would give you the pitched roof facing outward, which would be consistent with the existing house now, right?
It's
The
a pyramid roof.
Yes, with the pyramid roof, because I think the new garage also has that, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm looking at this correctly. I mean, from the side you can see it, but looking at it from the front of you, you have this expansive addition that really doesn't look like it doesn't maintain the character of the existing house. That's how I see that.
Any other questions from members of the board? Mr. Simon?
Did you consider, does it have to be a two-car garage? Or did you consider just making it work with a one-car garage?
I did. It's a married couple, so getting one to the other, I just don't think it would work.
Other questions from members of the board? Okay. Are there any members of the audience who have questions or comments on this application? Okay. Let me give you a choice. We can, we'll give you one chance to say anything in addition. I guess the question is, the choice is we can proceed now after you give any final remarks you have to a vote tonight, or if you want to retreat until our next meeting and see if you can either come up with reasons, a fuller explanation why none of our suggestions work, or come back with a somewhat modified plan.
Or find a conforming plan and not have to come back at all.
Yeah, well, that's what there are conforming plans. We're trying to avoid doing a lot of those measures. So that's.
But basically, those are your options. You can ask for a vote after your summation, or you can ask to carry it to explore your options.
I'm not really sure I can, with this design option, I'm not sure that I can maybe shave it off a foot or more. But beyond that, I'm not sure I can take it beyond that. So,
So are you asking for the board to vote tonight on this
Um,
application? Based on the comments you heard?
I'll take it to a summation, or carry it over. I'll relook at it and advise the client.
Okay. When is the next meeting?
Next meeting is October 16th.
Okay, so let me, and then let me just announce so we're covered. Okay, so this matter is being carried until our meeting on October 16th. No further notice will be provided, so if you're interested in this application, you should come back. If, for whatever reason, you've come up with a brilliant idea, but you can't get revised plans to us for the 16th, just let Mr. Petto know, and we will then announce at that meeting that we'll carry it to the November meeting. So, you know, don't feel like you're rushed, if, you know, and, you know, you've heard our comments and you've heard our concerns, and, you know, the better you're able to address that, the better it'll be for you. And, you know, we're trying to work with you. It's just this is a much larger variance than we, you know, normally even see, much less approve, and we're trying to get you what the programming for your parents, so it meets their needs, but is more consistent with the ordinance.
Understood. Thank you.
So we'll see you in October, and whenever you're ready. And obviously, if you come up with a conforming design, you don't have to come back to us at all.
That would be the best. Thank you.
The next application is that of the 47 Mission Street Trust for owner of property at 47 Mission Street. This is an application for a variance to construct an addition to the existing two-family dwelling on the property. The property is in the R2 two-family zone. The property is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 12 in Block 3111. The variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45B1 to permit a front yard setback for principal buildings of less than the required 25 feet. A variance is also requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45C1 to permit a minimum side yard setback for principal buildings of less than the required 10 feet. A variance is also requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45E to permit a building coverage greater than the permitted maximum 25% of the lot. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Would you both raise your right hands? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes.
State your names and addresses.
Małgorzata Dogan, 46 West Valley Brook Road, Long Valley, New Jersey.
My name is Wojciech Szymański. I'm living in the Elmwood Park, 147 Birchwood Drive.
You want to spell your first and last names, please?
Wojciech, last name Szymnski.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back.
Yes.
Haven't seen you for a couple of months. Do you want to explain what you're proposing to do with this property?
Absolutely. Dear board members, Mr. Chairman, this is another project on Mission Street, 47 Mission Street. The house right now is a two-family house built 100 years ago. It's very small. Thank you. Is it okay? Yep. Oh, okay. So what we would like to do, we would like to, with your permission, rebuild this house, renovate it, make it livable for a younger, modern family. And to do that, we're asking your permission to put an addition on the back of the property. Addition would be for the first floor and for the second floor. Now, the existing structure is only on the right-hand side, it's only 3 inches away from a property line. So what we are proposing is to put a new addition 4.6 inches away from the right side from the right property line on the right-hand side. That's going to give us more feasible place to work. So we still would need a variance for that. And then on the left side, we would like to align the addition with the existing left side of the building. And there we have 4 feet setback. The plans you have are not the best plans. All those numbers are very tiny and they are hard to read. So I actually made extra copies for each of you of exactly what I have here, and then you can see the numbers a lot better. I can give them to you if that's better.
I think we have full site.
You do, but you are missing these numbers. They are and they are so small they are impossible to read.
So other than the dimensions on the plan, the rest of it is identical to what the board's looking at?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So we'll mark it as A1 if you want to, Mr. Chairman, you're going to accept that?
Yes, I want to understand. The numbers are the same, they're just larger?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. There's one difference on the numbers. This setback here on your tiny little plans is on the tiny little numbers is 3.75, but that's because it was a miscalculation. It's really 4 feet, not 3.7, not 3 feet and 3/4.
So the dimension that says 3 feet 10 3/4 inches, that's the one you're talking about?
That's the one I'm talking about. That's 4 feet. And
Plans are otherwise the same?
yes, everything is the same. The numbers here are the same. Everything is the same. This is just easier to read. So, yeah, we need variance, side variance on the left side. We need a side variance on the right side. We would like to fix the whole porch and the front of the house, so we would need the front variance. We are okay with the rear variance, but we do need, what is the variance for the?
That was a coverage variance.
Coverage variance.
And I just wanted to clarify for the board, the applicant did notice for the front yard setback variance, but the porch will remain. They're just shifting the access stair to the other side of the entry porch. And just to know for the board, uncovered staircases are allowed to project into a required front yard. So it technically does not actually trigger a front yard setback variance.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, we are moving the stairs. The stairs right now are on the right side, but because we are not putting addition throughout the whole width of the house, only through the little addition, existing addition, for the flow and the layout of the apartments in the house, it's better to put the front stairs and the doors on the left side of the building, move it from the right side. Because then we can put the staircase on the left side and have a nicer flow throughout the whole house here. But like Ram said, maybe we don't need the variance for that. Because the porch is existing.
Questions from members of the board?
Your plans show that there's a basement and an attic. Did you consider using any of those as habitable space?
There is an existing basement.
Mm-hmm.
If we can use it as habitable space, or maybe like a recreation room, then yes, but not as a bedroom, or not as like a separate apartment.
And why couldn't you use it as a bedroom?
Because then we would need to have egress windows and access. We don't have room for egress windows here at all.
Okay. I'm kind of troubled by how big this addition is compared to the existing house. And I'd maybe put the office, you know, in the basement to kind of reduce the depth of the addition.
Well, what we could possibly do is maybe we have this is a deck on the back of the property. We don't have to have this deck though.
I don't think the deck is problematic. It's just the mass of that house. You know, if you're next door, now you're going to be looking at the side of a house as opposed to, you know, a backyard that was once there.
The house next door, if you even look at the survey here, extends all the way.
Yeah, but on the other side.
This one is smaller, but there's a lot of houses that extend through there, and I took some, can I just show you the?
Yeah. Oh, do you have to mark it?
Yeah, we're gonna mark it as A2.
Okay.
Okay.
So when you come around here, we'll mark it.
Okay.
Just identify what we're marking as A2.
It's Google Earth map of the property. Just to show where this house ends, where how far the other houses are. Even this one here extends all the way. I think it's on exhibit 2. So I understand the concern of the addition being long and overpowering, but in the neighborhood there's a lot of houses that are long with long additions. Maybe what we could do is to break it up. It's only 16 feet wide. It's not that big, but maybe we could add some windows on the floor just to break it up a little bit, or maybe change the siding, the color, or maybe the texture of the siding, the style, so it doesn't feel overpowering. It's a narrow addition, but it said it's only 16 feet. It's hard to make it work the way it is.
No, I understand. I just, you know, there's other space in the building that doesn't seem to be being used to its full potential, and I think if we consider those spaces, we should reduce the size of the addition.
The only problem with the basement is, I don't think it's even full 6 feet high. So to use it, we would have to excavate. And to excavate the basement with the existing building and taking all the soil out without the equipment, that's extremely difficult. And then we have another question of going into underpinning the foundation if the foundation is not that deep.
And how about the attic?
I'm sorry?
How about the attic?
We can definitely use the attic for the second floor, but please keep in mind it's a two-family house. So we can definitely use the attic and the second floor together.
I mean, that would, because you could reduce, instead of having a 2-story addition, it could just be a 1-story addition, and you could use the attic as one of your bedrooms, or even 2 of your bedrooms, if it's 20 by 31.
And combine and just do the 1-story addition here.
Yeah.
Or maybe partial extension just to even it out a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not ideal, but especially, you know, there's other houses that are that long on the street.
Yeah,
but,
and I mean, we've heard from other neighbors on other applications that, you know, they have a house and suddenly someone builds a huge addition to it, and in their backyard, they're staying inside, they don't get sun, you know, they don't have the same views that they have. So I understand other people have done it. I'm just saying I don't think that it's popular. So there's a way that we can reduce the size of it and reduce the impact on the property and the other neighbors. I think.
Well, the property on the left we don't have to worry about because they are way longer than this house is ever going to be, even with this full extension. The property on the right, is so neglected, such a poor condition that I don't even know how it's standing. And on the back of the property, they have cars that haven't been moved in years, overgrown with, ivy and bushes.
In Montclair, that means that someone's coming up very soon to buy it.
I actually went, I offered
Yeah.
Charles, he lives on 19 Midland Avenue, and he said no, absolutely not, because he owns the house next door. So he doesn't live there. I know he had violations from the town for overgrown property and neglecting the property. So he did trim some of it, and that was it. So it's not painted, it's not updated, the front porch is falling apart. I don't think we have to worry about the garden and the plants dying over there. It's a little different neighborhood, it's Mission Street, so,
Other questions from the board?
I guess, I mean, the concern and, I think, what you did on the property at, what was it, 27 Mission
Right.
Street, and, what you're proposing here is an indication of what is hopefully happening, because the house next to you is not the only house in poor condition on Mission Street. And,
And also, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just, we have to have a good layout there and nice apartments to, be part of that, rebuilding the whole neighborhood. We have to be able to, like I said, to rebuild it and to put those extra bedroom or two there with a small office if possible.
Oh, and I guess, now, can we go is it impossible to have habitable space in the attic, or?
It's going to be a very narrow space, because the house itself is only 19 feet really wide. By the time we put, the roof, and we are limited with the height of 35, the space is going to be, I don't
Well,
have...
where I was heading is, putting the office up there.
Yes, possible, of course.
That would, give you an ability, I don't think, the concern is less about the first floor than the second floor, and, anything you can do to pull it back, while the building on the left side is, very large, that is somewhat atypical, as you got closer to Bloomfield Avenue, the lots get shallower and shallower, so you have buildings that are going closer to the rear line, but, the nice part of, the southern stretch of Mission Street is there is actually some decent-sized backyards, and to, as Ms. Harris said, to suddenly have a large two-story addition going substantially back from the point of view, under the assumption that whether it's next year or 10 years from now, that the house next to you on the right is going to get improved, and, also they'll want to attract good tenants to live there. So I guess the tricky part is how to do this, but let me do one other question before I forget, is your plans are showing, I think, the last step of the stairs leading up going into the public right-of-way on the sidewalk. Is there a way you can, the existing stairs do that now, but is there a way you can adjust that so you're...
You mean the last step here?
Yeah.
If you cut the platform is front of
Yeah, if we make the deck smaller by a foot.
Right, and it would just have to be where the stairs are, that you would pull it back. You could, have the railing go.
if we will remove it, then I think it will look nice and uniform to remove throughout the whole.
That I'll leave up to you. It's just, you would have to ask permission of the township to locate in the right-of-way, and I think given
The answer is
the
we
congestion in the area, it would be better not to do that.
can. The answer is we can, yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from members of the board? Mr. McCullough?
I also have a lot of concern about the size of what's being proposed and the density of the neighborhood itself. It seems to me that, as projects are being proposed for Mission Street, this is an opportunity to help alleviate some of that density, to enable that neighborhood to reflect the larger character of the community, rather than continuing to be viewed as an area that is out of character with the rest of.
That's exactly, we don't want that.
Yeah, so
definitely.
I really do have that concern, so, but in terms of the design itself, I was, in addition to the office, I was looking at for both the first and the second floor, where you've located the lavatory. You have to go into the kitchen in order to access the bathroom, bathing facilities, and all of that. And I'm wondering, could you not have placed that somewhere else? So for the two bedrooms, you're having to travel all the way into the kitchen in order to access the bathroom.
We could change, we could switch the office with the bathroom. That would be more on the side of the kitchen and closer to the bedrooms.
That certainly would make more sense to me
Yeah.
than the other way around.
I agree, definitely. Definitely.
Now, if what was being suggested that somehow the extension could be I guess if you were to utilize the attic for the second floor, would alternatively, if you were not doing the extension for both levels, would you move both bedrooms to the attic? Is there space to do that?
No, definitely not. I can definitely move the office there.
And one bedroom? Because I'm trying to understand how you would, for the second floor apartment, how would you have bedrooms if you didn't extend out?
And have just one bedroom on the first floor, second floor, and then one bedroom and the
In the
office.
attic, yeah.
But then we would also have to add a bathroom there, if we have a bedroom upstairs.
You'd have to have what, you said?
A bathroom,
That's a question, too. Yeah.
right? And then, how about leave the first floor the way it is, and then the second floor, we would cut off where the bedroom number 1 ends, and then attic, we would extend the attic to where the bedroom number 1 ends on the second floor, and this way, hopefully we could have enough room in the attic to create the office, the bedroom, and the bathroom without doing that whole big addition of the second floor. That one, maybe.
And would that essentially create 3 stories?
It depends on dormers, so
Yeah, that we were just talking about. We would have to add the dormers.
depends on the extent of the dormers along the facade wall. More than 50% of the facade becomes a third story.
Yeah.
They could have dormers up to 50% of the width of the facade at that point.
Facade, yeah.
Any other questions or members of the board?
Can I just ask one other question? And that is, you mentioned that the property that apparently is not being used right now is something that likely will, I don't know, might have to be demolished or whatever. They're going to have to do something with that piece of property, right?
The one on the right-hand side?
Yes, that you also considered.
I would love to have an opportunity to invest in the property, but right now, I spoke with the gentleman and he said he is not interested in selling it.
I guess the question I have is, I mean, if we permitted you to do the kind of extension that you're looking to do with this property, given the fact that on the one side you already have an extensive building, and then there's the potential that on the opposite side there could also be an extensive building to sort of maintain the character of these long apartment-oriented structures. I guess the question I'm really wanting to ask is, would there be enough access on either side, fire access? If there, you know, if a situation emerged in which the fire department actually had to be able to respond, is there enough space on either side of those?
On the right-hand side, yes, there's a very wide driveway between the house on the right-hand side and another house, which is a six-family house, and with a huge parking lot on the back.
Is it a very wide driveway?
On the right-hand side of the house on the right side, yes.
A driveway. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a very wide.
Well, no, it's not a driveway. It's hard to call it a driveway.
The other side, right side. You're talking about to the right
Which
of the
one?
dilapidated house.
Correct, yes.
So
Yeah. So they would have to get there around like
Right.
that somehow. Correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions from members of the board?
Sorry, the house on the left has a fire escape that's on your property too, right? Is that,
I'm sorry?
the house on the left has a fire escape that's on your property, is that?
It's fence.
But there's a fire escape that's on your property too. So, yeah, the fence is clear, but the fire escape is also on your property.
Oh, yeah, right from the top right there, which is encroaching on that property, yeah. I don't know how that was actually allowed to be built this way, so that's
The
encroaching
interesting is the extension.
on that property.
Other questions from members of the board? Are there any members of the audience who have questions, comments, anything you want to say about the application? Anything further you wish to add before we discuss and vote?
Well, with your permission, we would like to, if the deck is not a problem, we'll keep it. If it's a problem, we can remove it just to have more, I don't know, access to the back of the property. We would like to keep the first floor the way it is, and the second floor, make it shorter, extend it only to where the bedroom one ends. And then attic, make it full 35 feet height attic and extend it over another, I would say, 10 feet to where the bedroom one ends on the second floor. So, here, let me just show you this one. We would like to keep the first floor the way it is. Second floor, finish it right here. And then the attic, bring it up to 35 feet, add dormers for lights where we can, 50% of that side, and same on this side. that will allow us to put, hopefully, the bedroom. It's not going to be easy because it's still very narrow space, but it's doable. And then extend the attic to end with this storage here.
But would you be keeping the same side yards that you're proposing for the addition? One of the positives of what you're doing is you're increasing the setback.
It's even tougher to do that, but if that.
But your
Yes.
plans now are showing you're making 2 bedrooms work in that width, so it's obviously.
The problem with the attic is we have sloped roof like this, and we can't utilize the whole 19 feet for floor plan. Only what's in the middle, 6 feet and up, can be utilized in the floor plan. Everything else in the attic is really wasted space.
But your office is smaller anyway.
Exactly, an office, a bedroom is smaller.
And you're going to have,
Yeah.
your bedroom may be
The
more
bedroom,
rectangular
bathroom,
than.
Maybe we can fit a bedroom and a bathroom somehow on that smaller
Okay.
space. Yeah, we'll make it.
So you're proposing to extend the attic as it is 4 feet, but why would you just mentioned make it the whole 35 feet deep, right?
No, the
attic?
height, the height would not.
Oh,
Just the
okay.
height,
Okay,
just the
got it,
height.
sorry.
But with that attic, with the side setbacks go, I mean, 'cause the attic's on that bump
The
out there.
attic would be
Okay.
right here,
Yeah,
but
she's
it's
gonna
not
go out on that, so.
Right.
So she's
Well-
gonna be up on the top.
Well, okay. I'm not sure we're all saying the same thing. So let me do what I would propose as conditions, and you have to tell me if it's workable.
Sure.
The second floor addition would go no further back than where you're showing on these plans, the end of the bedroom 1, the wall between bedroom 1 and bedroom 2. You would be able to do a half-story addition above the second floor that would not exceed 35 feet, would qualify only as a half-story, not a full story, and you would be keeping for the addition area the proposed setbacks of 4 feet 6 inches, 4.5 feet on one side and 4 feet on the other side.
That's correct.
And to be precise, 4 feet 6 inches on the northern side and 4 feet on the southern side of the property. And the other condition is that no portion of the stair encroach on the public property.
And yes, the stairs here, what we can do is maybe make,
I'll let you deal with that.
If I
I
could
don't-
just
I'm sorry,
mention one additional wrinkle to this, is that any proposed dormers on the half-story level will have to be set back at least 12.5 feet from the front wall of the building to comply with the front yard setback. So
could we get a front yard
I just wanted to
setback
mention that.
variance to get the dormers up in the attic?
the required front yard setback for the dormer construction will be 25 feet. from the front
I
property line.
understand. I'm working on, okay, so I don't have that dimension on here, unfortunately.
We do. It's right here on the.
No, the 25 feet, I was trying to figure out how much of the building is within the 25 feet, and whether you can work with having the dormers start at that 25-foot line.
Oh, I see.
It appears based on the plans, I mean, the living room, family room dimension, the depth of that is about 11 feet 9 inches, and it would be about 12.5 feet to that. So approximately the dividing wall behind the refrigerator between the kitchen and the living room would be about the extent of the
Right.
25-foot setback.
Which doesn't give us much room for the dormers. So we would like to add.
So essentially, all dormers would need to be located to the rear of that
Other
line.
right, which is only 4 feet of the main structure left.
But you're expanding the attic back.
Correct, but only on, if we keep the 25-foot line, 25-foot line is approximately somewhere here. So then I
No,
can.
the 25-foot line, as I said, would be about the wall between the living room, family room, and the
this
kitchen.
one
Nope, but right behind the refrigerator.
Here?
A little bit lower. See where the refrigerator is?
Oh, yeah, I see.
That wall. Because that's about 12 feet, and your setback from the front property line is about 12
Oh,
feet.
it's 12 feet, but it's 25 feet.
Is their full requirement.
25 feet.
Right. So if you carry that line of that wall across to the attic plan, so from that point back, you could have dormers, essentially.
Oh, okay.
Without a variance.
But
Without the front yard setback variance.
But we
correct.
would still need the variance for the height, because the height right now, we would have to redo the whole roof to be able to use this space as a bedroom, because right now the height is too small to do that.
How high is the existing?
The existing house is 32,
31.
31. So it's 4 feet short of 35 feet, and with that pitch like this, that's impossible to do anything.
But you're,
With the maximum height.
Maximum height is 35, but we need a variance.
Right, they'll need the front yard variance for
Oh, yeah,
to
variance
increase the peak of the
to
roof in that
increase
portion.
just the peak of the house.
So the front yard variance would still be applicable to raise the peak from 31 to 35 at the front of the dwelling.
Right.
so that's Mr. Sullivan's question as to whether people had adequate notice.
There was a notice as to the front yard setback. I mean, if someone was interested in that, they
Right.
would have been here, so I think we can
Okay,
avoid
so
that.
it's a notice, even though they were thinking it meant something else, it did say front yard variance, and, okay. Okay. Okay, so you're comfortable with that, and we'll figure out if the board is comfortable with that.
As long as the board is comfortable and you, Mr. Chairman, I'll make it work.
Okay, is there anything further you want to add before we discuss and vote on the application?
No, I think, no.
And I'm not going to give my comments, but let me reiterate my understanding of what we're going to do as conditions. To do the simple one, that no portion of the steps will encroach on the public right-of-way, that the addition be scaled back so on the second floor, so it goes no further than what is currently shown as the wall between bedroom 1 and bedroom 2, that the side yards be 4 feet, on any portion of the addition be 4 feet on
The left side?
the left side or south side, and 4 feet 6 inches on the north side or right side of the house. The only exception to that is let's do this, the height not exceed 35 feet, and we're granting for the portion of the attic roof that is over the existing house, we're granting a front yard variance for that, and I'm assuming that at least that portion is going to have to keep the existing setbacks.
It will keep existing setback, we just change the height to 35. Yes.
Okay. And then I want to add, because of where the building is currently in relation to the property right, that any stormwater from the roofs be directed onto the subject property and away from the neighboring
Of
properties.
course.
Okay, so we'll start.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question about that? Is it possible for us to get a dimension to that back bedroom wall? I think I feel more comfortable if we could say, the second level extension should not,
The problem is
Instead of
the
saying-
25 feet set, the rear property line is at an angle,
Oh, you would like to have the...
Yeah, if we could just know where that back wall,
okay, so,
of the bedroom is.
Where this
Yeah.
one, and right, the second floor
Yeah.
back wall would be...
yes, I'd feel more comfortable having that in the resolution than the rear wall of the back bedroom.
Would it be okay if I ask the architect first thing tomorrow morning? And then we
okay.
can put the-
So, okay, I think that we can do this, so,
So do we get new drawings or at least something to see?
um,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
well, I'm trying to, as much as I'm sure she likes coming before us, since she's been here twice this summer, I don't know that, but I think I think we can do it in terms of, that'll be the wall that they be required to submit plans before we vote on the resolution, so the actual resolution can show the distance, that will show the revised location with the dimension, so we can say that it, and whether we do it by the length of the second floor, the problem with the property
Not the
line
rear.
is...
The front.
The front, oh, okay, distance from the front property line, that,
Absolutely. I'll have the architect prepare new drawings before the resolutions and display all the details. and-
resolution is in 4 weeks tonight, hopefully, okay. We'll start discussion, Mr. Caulfield.
Yes, I'm in favor of what the chair recommended, and thank you.
Thank you.
I'm in favor with the conditions that the chair set forth.
Mr. Church.
Yeah, I'm also in favor of the application with the conditions specified by the chair.
Okay, Mr. McCulloch.
Yes, I also agree. I'm comfortable with the proposed changes.
Mr. Simon.
Generally, I'm not in favor. I definitely not with the original plan. With the revised plan, I'm more open to see what the drawings come back with. I think the two parts that I have a problem with is, one, obviously you didn't explore all the potential options that you had with the property. And then the second thing is just in general, people are using the current condition of the neighborhood to throw up any monstrosity that they want without actually trying to make it work, without having to come for a variance. So you obviously have options to make it work within the current rules. So I'm glad that you're open to taking it back and visiting the plans, but without seeing those revised drawings and the new sketches, I'm not in favor.
I would be in favor. I mean, I don't disagree with Mr. Simon in terms of, I think because Mission Street has seen better days and now there is some improvement, that means you can build anything. I think, the first application, the applicant name is just putting in a second-story addition on the first-story portion, which is obviously much easier to deal with. But I think, one, she is improving the existing side yard condition with the addition, which I think is a positive. I think, my biggest concern with the original proposal was the depth of the second floor addition, and she's agreed to reduce that significantly. I think actually by having the attic with dormers is actually going to enhance the appearance of the building and give it, break up the massing a little, even though it's going to be a little taller. It'll, I think, be more attractive, and I think having apartments with 2 bedrooms is probably long-term better for the neighborhood, and having kids and just being a
It is becoming a
just-
really nice street and really great neighborhood. And talking about throwing monstrosities, I also have 68 Mission Street, which was a complete disaster when I bought it 3 years ago. And it's the nicest nicest house on the block. So I'm really trying to, instead of throwing ugly houses, I'm trying to make them look really nice. And like I said, the proof is there, 68 Mission Street. It's really nice.
And I think with the conditions that this will not result in a substantial detriment to the public good or substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan. So if someone want to make a motion
I'll make a motion.
to,
What you said.
So, Mr. Church, the motion is to approve the application subject to the conditions that were articulated by the chairman.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Graham, you want to call
Yes.
the roll?
Mr. Caulfield?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Simon?
Fix it, to which order he's going in.
Mr. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Church?
Yes.
And Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you.
Next application is that of St. Luke's Episcopal Church for property located at 73 South Fullerton Avenue. This is an application for site plan approval and variance relief for the installation of a new entry door, pedestrian sidewalk, and HVAC units in the R1 one-family zone. The property is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 1 and Lot 14 in Block 2111. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-46C to permit HVAC units to be located in the front yard along Union Street. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes.
Good evening. Susan S. Singer on behalf of St. Luke's Episcopal Church. I'll try not to repeat what you said, but by way of background, St. Luke's Church has recently completed substantial improvements to make the church more physically accessible. The last step in this project is to create barrier-free access to the church's thrift shop, which is known as the Second Time Around Shop, or sometimes we will refer to it just as the shop. St. Luke's is making this application for minor site plan approval and variance relief to make possible that barrier-free access to the shop. The church is proposing a new door in an existing window opening facing Union Street. The new door is to be accessed by a new pedestrian walkway connecting the existing public sidewalk along Union Street to the new door. The location of the proposed new entry necessitates relocating 3 existing HVAC units to the northern facade wall, since the units would otherwise be in the way of the new walkway. The proposal includes 2 additional HVAC units in that location, and the church proposes landscaping to screen the relocated HVAC units. The variance is required. Because Montclair Code 347-46C, because HVAC units are considered accessory structures, which are not permitted in front yards. And we will be presenting as witnesses the rector of St. Luke's Church, Reverend John Minnell, who's seated here, and we will also present Paul Sionis as an expert witness. Mr. Sionis is a licensed architect, a licensed planner, and a licensed landscape architect. So I'd like to proceed with Reverend Minnell.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes, I do.
State your name and address, please.
John Minnell, 18 Edge Hill Street, Princeton, New Jersey.
Okay.
Reverend Minnell,
Yes, so
what is your relationship to St. Luke's?
I, as the rector or the senior minister at St. Luke's, a position I've served at for most of the last 13 years.
Would you describe your role as it relates to St. Luke's physical property?
Canonically, I actually have responsibility for all the property and how it's used, and as one of the chief visionaries, help work to determine how we use the spaces at best to serve the people that we try to serve.
And how long have you served as rector of St. Luke's?
12 years and 9 months.
I'd like to ask you, has St. Luke's undertaken any major projects in the past several years relating to the physical property.
Yes, in the past several years, about 5 years ago, we did a major capital campaign for, and the title of it was Breaking Down Barriers. The intention of it was, as Sue mentioned, to make as many of the spaces that we have fully accessible to everybody who uses them.
Are there any significant aspects of this project that are still to be completed?
This is one of the significant aspects, and then the last piece, if we can acquire the funding, will be an elevator in the parish house.
What aspects are left to complete that are at issue here with respect
The
to
issue-
the changes I described in my first statement?
Yes. So the issue here then is that it would be this last piece of getting accessibility into the second time around shop. Right now, the current entrance to get in that, it requires you to open a door, go up one step, go 3 feet further, go up a second step, walk about 10 feet, then go up 3 more steps, and then go down a ramp to get into the shop.
So would you give us a description of what the second time around shop does?
Yeah, the second time around shop, it's a thrift store. And so in the thrift store ministry, a big part of that is fundraising, and a lot of that fundraising goes to has gone to ministries and things outside of the church, including Montclair Volunteer Ambulance Company, the YMCA, and other pieces in the community, and then some of it stays in the church. The thrift store also has a secondary ministry that's really important of helping out people who are in need, whether it's our Tony's Kitchen guests or other people who come to us in the community, and we will simply give to anybody who asks us of us. We don't ask them to show us any proof that they have need. It also provides an opportunity for volunteers in the community that they build to help them feel like they're doing something. Many of the volunteers who have traditionally staffed the shop have been senior citizens, and accessibility has been an issue for them as well.
Traditionally, have volunteers included people who are both members of the church and people from outside the walls of the church?
Yes, much like Tony's Kitchen, our other major ministry, a lot of volunteers come from other places within the community.
You've mentioned Tony's Kitchen a couple of times. For anyone here who doesn't know what it is, would you give us a brief description?
Sure. Tony's Kitchen is a feeding ministry of St. Luke's. In the last year, we provided 180,000 meals through on-site meals as well as backpack programs and other meals that we sent out into the community.
Now, you've said that the church wants to make the second time around shop more accessible. And I think you've described the existing entrances and exits from the shop. If this application were to be approved, what physical changes would the church want to make in terms of ingress and egress?
Again, this would change the main entranceway to the shop. It had been the one that I described before. If this is approved by the board, this will then become the primary entrance to the shop that will be barrier-free.
And in your view, what would be the public benefit of that change?
Well, the public benefit to that would be the ease of accessibility to anybody who uses the shop, and anybody who volunteers at the shop, folks who have struggled before, as well as we've had volunteers in past years who have been differently abled, and this would give them opportunity to work at the shop as well.
Now, how many HVAC units are currently in place on the Union Street side of the church?
So there are currently 3 HVAC units that are already on the street side.
And in lay terms, where does the church propose to move them?
So the church proposed to move them around the corner about 15 feet from where they were. So they were on a east-facing wall, and then we'll move them to a north-facing wall.
You know, you talked a bit about, I just want to go back to something you said about who are the customers and who gets the clothing and all of that. Could you be a little more expansive and describe the range of customers?
Yeah, there's actually a wonderful range of customers, from high school students coming in who are thrifting as a hobby, to senior citizens who are on a tight budget, as well as our Tony's Kitchen guests who are of lesser means in many cases. And so the thrift store has that kind of broad appeal, and then right down, frankly, Sue, to the folks who are desperately needy, who just come by and like, I need a pair. They come in absolutely tattered clothes and like, do you have a pair of pants I can have? And our answer is always yes.
Now, the church is also proposing to place 2 additional units at the new location, and would you explain why the church is seeking to add those 2 units?
Yeah, since we're doing this, as we look to the future, one of the things about our thrift shop space right now is it does not have air conditioning. So one of the things that we would like to do in the future is add air conditioning to the actual thrift store space. The second unit is anticipation of another project. As our Tony's Kitchen backpack program has expanded so much, we're just flat out of space to handle all the food that we come in the 400 backpacks a week that we're processing right now, and it needs to be sort of on one level. So a longer-term plan that is still in the very early stages is to put air conditioning and heating in the basement of the church, the undercroft of the church, and make that a volunteer space where we can do our backpack packing and storage of the foodstuffs that we go into those.
You've mentioned the backpacks.
Yeah.
Perhaps people don't know what that means.
Yeah. So one of the expansions in our Tony's Kitchen program has been backpacks of food. So we send out healthy backpacks mostly to school programs where we've identified that the majority or an overwhelming majority of the kids who participate in these programs are at risk, are in need. And so everybody who comes to these programs gets a backpack full of food at the end of the day to take home that can provide a family of 4 up to 2 meals. Generally, of healthy food.
And then the backpacks
come back when they come back to the program. We fill them back up and send them back out.
Is there any intention to add a sign for the second time around shop if this application is approved?
There's no intention to add any signage at this point. Our traditional signage from the shop is open. Goes on the existing signs that we have in the church, and we put a sign out there that says the shop is open for the limited hours that we have been open and anticipate being open.
If the board should have approved this application, do you anticipate any increase in the number of customers coming to the shop?
No, not really. It's there. The thrift store industry is fairly well saturated. So this is simply a matter of making it easier for the folks who have been using the shop to access the shop.
Thank you. I think that completes my questions.
Any questions from members of the board? Mr. Simon?
Has there been any study as to the expected noise level with the additional HVAC units?
Yeah, I believe.
There has been a study, and I expect that Mr. Sionis will address that in some detail.
Other questions from Mr. Caulfield?
So this new entrance, you'll just be able to walk right into the store?
Yes.
Okay. No up down.
No up down. Yeah, barrier free.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the board? You want to call your next witness?
Yes, I'd like to call Paul Sionis. Mr. Sionis, would you give the board...
Would you raise your right hand? Do you
So
swear to tell
sorry.
the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address, please.
My name is Paul Sionis. My address is 8 Hillside Avenue, Montclair, New Jersey.
Okay, and just a short circuit. Paul, you're testifying both as an architect and
And a planner, yes.
Okay, and your licenses are current in both?
Yes, they are.
Okay, we accept
And
them
I
as
didn't
an
hear
expert.
if you said this. I apologize. You're licensed also in landscape architecture?
I am.
In addition to planning and architecture?
And that's current also.
I'd like
We accept
request
him as an
approval of
expert in
Mr.
all three
Sionis as an
areas.
expert.
So we have one exhibit that I'll pass around.
Okay, we're going to mark that as A1.
Mr. Sionis, these are, the A1 consists of, I believe, 8 pages.
That's correct.
I think it would be helpful if you would briefly identify each one.
Sure. The exhibit, instead of a PowerPoint on the wall, this is a copy of 8 exhibits that would be part of a PowerPoint. So it consists of photographs of the church, a colored version of the site plan that has been filed with the application. Page 4 is a Google map aerial view of the site. Page 5 is a portion of the Montclair zoning map with the site highlighted. Page 6 are 2 pertinent drawings that were in the package of the north elevation of the church and a detail of the proposed entry door to the second time around shop. Page 7 is a partial first floor plan and site plan. The floor plan shows the existing second time around shop and the proposed improvements. Page 8 is an enlargement of the proposed barrier-free entry walk and the relocated 3 air conditioning units and 2 additional HVAC units in addition to the proposed landscaping.
And page 6, 7, and 8 are drawings prepared by your firm?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Sionis, would you briefly describe this application?
Sure. As you heard from Reverend Manel, over the last several years, St. Luke's Episcopal Church has undertaken a series of projects that they've called breaking down barriers. And the purpose of the project is to make the buildings more accessible to people of all physical abilities. So as part of breaking down barriers, this application proposes a new barrier-free entry or handicapped entry to the church's existing thrift shop, which they call the second time around shop. And part of this application requires a C variance to locate 5 HVAC units between the building and the curb, which the building fronts on along Union Street. So if we look at page 1, I've highlighted, I've drawn an orange circle around the area where the 3 existing HVAC units currently are. And this is a view taken from directly across the street, looking to the south at the north side of St. Luke's Church. Page 2 is another photograph, and I've highlighted the 3 existing HVAC units that are on the property now. And you can see there's 3 existing trees there. There's 1 existing Japanese maple tree next to the 3 existing HVAC units. Then there's a weeping cherry tree that with the branches that extend down to the ground level. And then just to the west of that, towards South Fullerton Avenue, is an existing dogwood tree.
And 3 of the, obviously there are 3 units existing right now that
That's
are
correct.
shown in that photo. And how many additional units?
The proposal is to add 2 additional units. So the 3 units now, 1 is to air condition the sanctuary, and the other, 2 of them are for the sanctuary, and 1 of them is for to air condition the sacristy upstairs. And then the proposed units are as 1 is to provide heating and air conditioning for the second time around shop, and the other new unit is proposed for the remainder of the basement space, which is currently not heated or cooled.
Would you describe the site and building?
Sure. As many of you may be familiar with this property, the property is located at the southeastern corner of Union Street and South Fullerton Avenue. The property is 0.96 acres, and the site has a slope from west to east. So it slopes from South Fullerton Avenue towards the east, towards Prospect. The lot's improved with St. Luke's Church and the parish hall. The church was originally constructed in 1889, and then there was a building addition completed in 1929, and the exterior of the church is all stone. The main church building, or sanctuary as it's labeled on page 3, has frontages on both South Fullerton Avenue and Union Street. There's an attached 3-story parish hall that's set back further from the sanctuary, and it's connected with a connector bridge that connects the sanctuary to the parish hall at the second floor level, or at the sanctuary level. The parish hall has all of the church offices. It has classrooms. It has meeting rooms. In addition to Tony's Kitchen, which is a food pantry operated by the church. Tony's Kitchen is at the ground floor level of the parish hall. There's also a separate manse or rectory further to the south on the property. The manse is turned sideways to South Fullerton Avenue. The church's thrift shop, which I said is known as the Second Time Around shop, is located in the southeast corner of the lower level, or the basement level underneath the sanctuary. As you've heard, the thrift shop is part of the church's mission, very similar to Tony's Kitchen, and that clothing is distributed either at very low cost or often for free to the guests who ask for it. Currently, the shop, access to the shop requires someone to enter underneath the bridge on the south side of that sanctuary building and basically travel 5 steps up to get into the basement, then up another ramp to enter that shop. And not everyone who enters the shop, and particularly many of the guests, are able-bodied. So the church's goal is to make this barrier-free accessible. The property is also improved with an existing parking area that just to the east of the sanctuary, and that's labeled on the site plan. And there's also another driveway just to the north of the manse or the rectory, leading to a garage to the rear or to the east side of the rectory.
Thank you. Would you describe the surrounding area, please?
Sure. I'll refer to page 4, which is an enlargement of a Google map aerial view. And you can see that St. Luke's Church property is at the southeast corner of Union Street and South Fullerton Avenue. Property is directly adjoined by a single-family house to the east on Union Street and another single-family house that's to the south of the manse on South Fullerton Avenue. Those single-family houses were built in the early part of the 20th century. Across Union Street, to the north side of Union Street, you can see on this map there's a 3-story mixed-use building with apartments and some offices on the first floor level of that building. To the east of that is the 8-story 57 Union Street. It's an 8-story residential building. And there's a driveway on the west side of that building with a parking lot to the rear of that building. So the air conditioning units are proposed to be relocated to where I drew an orange circle on the north side of that sanctuary. So the air conditioning units are to be across from the space between the 3-story mixed-use building and the driveway leading to that 8-story residential building. And this, according to the street signs, there's no limitation on parking on the streets. On Union Street, parking is allowed all day long, except permits are required for any overnight parking.
And what is the zoning?
So the zoning is R1, single-family zone, where this is a permitted use.
Now, would you describe the proposal?
Sure. And referring to page 6, so this is an application for minor site plan approval for the installation of the new entry door where there are existing windows and the new pedestrian sidewalk. We're also asking for variance relief to relocate those 3 air conditioning units from where they are now, moving them 10 feet to the north, and plus adding 2 additional HVAC units. So as I said, the church, and as Reverend Manel stated, the church completed several barrier-free projects last year that involved work on the interior of the church buildings. So this application involves providing barrier-free access from the outside into the thrift shop. So in order to do this, we're proposing a new entry door where there are existing windows at the lower level, and the door is to be within the 1929 edition and not in the original 1889 part of the building. So we already appeared before the Historic Preservation Commission to review this. They supported the proposal, and the work where the proposal includes providing the new door, which is inspired by a door that's already on the church buildings, a new slate shingled roof over this new door to provide protection from the elements, and then new cast stone pieces to match the stone on the building. So that will be, the cast stone will be fabricated to modify the existing window opening.
Perhaps I didn't catch it,
Sure.
but is it, as a result of the discussion with the Historic Preservation Commission, were there proposed revisions to the way the shingle shed roof would be constructed?
Right. On the bottom of page 6 is an enlarged detail of the slate shingled shed roof over the new entry door, and at the Historic Commission, they asked that the roof extends 6 inches, at least 6 inches, to the west of a proposed wood bracket. So the top drawing, which is the north elevation, which is a smaller drawing, you could see that the roof ended with the bracket, the proposed wood bracket. The Historic Commission requested that we extend the roof another 6 and we're showing it 6.5 inches beyond that bracket. So that change was as a result of the Historic Preservation Commission's input.
So that will be done?
That will be done,
Okay.
yes.
Would you address issues that arise because of the current location of the HVAC units?
Right. In order to place the new barrier-free entry walk, so we're proposing a new 4-foot wide walk that will extend from the existing sidewalk that is located just to the west of the church parking area. The existing sidewalk goes alongside of the church parking area to the public sidewalk along Union Street. We're proposing a new barrier-free walk from the new entry door to connect at the northern end of the existing sidewalk on the church property and the public sidewalk along Union Street. So in order to place the sidewalk there and the new entry door, we have to relocate the 3 HVAC units that are located where the proposed sidewalk is going. So we're proposing to move them around the corner to the north side, against the north side of the building, directly behind the existing dogwood tree, just to the southwest of the existing weeping cherry tree, but we're also proposing to screen them with evergreen planting. So we're showing total of, I think, 5 evergreen mountain laurels and 4 inkberries that are all evergreen, planted at 3.5 to 4 feet in height to screen the view of these HVAC units, even when the leaves are off the trees of those 2 deciduous trees. So we,
okay,
sure.
Question, interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but at the present time, those 3 HVAC units are in the front yard.
They are in the front yard,
Okay.
correct.
And what's the approximate distance that they would be moved to?
They'd be moving 10 feet to the north, 10 feet closer to Union Street.
Thank you.
Welcome. So we looked at alternative locations for the HVAC units. There's a flat roof above a portion of the church, but it's pretty high up, so it would be difficult to service the units. Someone would have to get on a ladder to service the units, and in our opinion, the HVAC units would be more visible from the surrounding properties if they're placed up on the rooftop. So in our opinion, this was the best location to place these units. As I said, there's already 3 units within the front yard. We're moving them 10 feet forward, but we're adding 2 more, and we're screening them with evergreen planting. The current units are not screened not screened at all with evergreens. Let's see.
Would you address the retaining wall?
Sure. In order to build this barrier-free ramp on the side of a slope, we're cutting into that slope, and we're doing a small retaining wall alongside of along the westerly side of this walk.
And the new concrete walk is to be barrier-free?
Correct.
Okay. With regard to suggestions or requests from the HPC, did they ask to review final selection of materials?
Yes, part of the HPP Historic Preservation Commission's suggestion was that they would like to review or have a review of the final selections of materials of the retaining wall, the entry door, and any exterior lighting. So we're showing new lighting underneath the new shed roof, the new slate shingled shed roof. So they asked to have a chance to review those specific materials. They also, as it said before, they asked that the roof be extended, made 6.5 inches wider, so it extends past that wood bracket, which we agree with and we're doing. And they also suggested we look at additional natural landscaping be incorporated to screen the HVAC units. So as I stated, we're showing five new evergreen shrubs to screen the units. The Historic Commission asked us to consider incorporating additional landscaping to help screen the units.
So is the applicant agreeing to do that?
Yes.
Did your team consider whether a barrier-free entry could be created at the existing entry locations?
Right. Yes, we did. I'm referring back to page 7, which has the floor plan of the existing second time around shop. The red arrow on page 7 at the top of the page indicates the current entrance to the second time around shop, which is underneath a bridge that connects the sanctuary to the parish hall. So currently, to enter the second time around shop, you open the door, go up a step, then go up another step, then there's 3 more steps on the inside, and then a ramp. So that was minimum of 5 vertical steps, or about 35 inches in height, and we'd have to have a 35-foot long ramp plus landing areas to have a ramp in that area. It doesn't work, and it wasn't suitable to place the barrier-free entry there. So really the best place was to look at existing windows that we could modify into a door, and the goal was to make it look like it was always there, like part of the 1929 addition.
What variances are required?
Well, there's one variance, which is a C variance from Montclair Code 347-46C, and that's to ask to allow the 5 HVAC units between the building and the curb on which the building fronts along Union Street. So HVAC units are considered accessory structures, and this location is not permitted under the ordinance. 3 of the units are already within the front yard between the building and the curb, but they're not screened, and we have to relocate them in order to do this barrier-free entrance to the second time around shop. So a variance is requested to locate these units within a defined front yard.
Are you familiar with the statutory requirements for granting the variance for this project?
Yes, I am. So the applicant is asking for a C variance, and in my opinion, it could be justified both under C1 grounds and C2 grounds. And under C1 grounds, a variance could be granted based on either the narrowness or shallowness or shape or topographic conditions of a property, or the building that's lawfully constructed thereon. So with this application, excuse me, due to the slope of the land or the topographic conditions, and also the lawfully existing building on the lot, this is deemed to be the best location to place a barrier-free entrance to this lower level thrift shop. There's no room between the existing building and the sidewalk along the east side of the building to place HVAC units, and all of the other locations to place HVAC units in close proximity to the second time around shop are all front yards. Everything between this building and Union Street or this sanctuary and South Fullerton Avenue are front yards, and those would also require front yard setbacks. However, this is in close proximity to the second time around shop. We feel that we could adequately screen these with the evergreen planting. And also, if you look at the site plan, or even if you look at page 7 on the site plan, you could see that a portion of the north elevation of the building jogs even closer to Union Street by approximately 5 feet. So the view of these HVAC units will not only be screened by the evergreen planting, but the view is partially screened from South Fullerton Avenue by the existing building, the way it jogs forward towards Union Street. As to that, we could also justify it under the C2 grounds, and under the C2 grounds, My opinion is that the purposes of the municipal land use law would be advanced by a deviation of the ordinance requirements, and the benefits would outweigh any detriments to the public good. And with the C2 variance, you have to look at how the variance would serve as a benefit to the town or to the community. So this application enables the applicant to provide barrier-free or handicapped access to the lower-level thrift shop. And along with Tony's Kitchen, the thrift shop provides a terrific service to the community. We're able to hide the relocated and the new HVAC units with evergreen landscaping, in addition to the 2 existing trees in the vicinity. At the same time, we're adding additional landscaping and the aesthetic benefit of the additional landscaping to this small area of the site and this corner of the north side of the building. And as I stated, in particular, the north side of the building jogs out further towards, closer to Union Street, and it helps to partially block the view of these units, at least from the west. The benefits of the deviation outweigh the detriment of relocating the HVAC units to the front yard. And as I've repeated, by relocating the HVAC units, we're able to provide barrier-free access to this lower level, and the lower level has never been accessible before.
Just, you may have addressed this, but where the HVAC units are located now,
Yes.
are they screened by?
They're not
greenery?
screened, correct.
Okay. Would you address the negative criteria?
Sure. In my opinion, the variances can be granted without substantial impairment of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance, and the benefits of the variance would substantially outweigh any detriment to the purposes of the zoning regulation. So we're able to provide barrier-free access to the lower level space for the very first time. There are already 3 HVAC units in this general vicinity and 2 established trees. We're relocating the 3 HVAC units by about 10 feet to the north, and it should not have a negative impact on the residential properties across the street, which are over 100 feet away from this proposed location. At the Historic Commission meeting, we were asked to review anticipated sound levels from the HVAC units. Adding 2 more units does not significantly add to the decibel levels of the 3 existing units, as the rule is that the first unit, which is the largest unit that serves the sanctuary, that produces a sound level of 75 decibels according to the manufacturer's information. It's primarily utilized on Saturdays and Sundays during warm weather. The additional units are all smaller, what are known as split systems. They all have a rating of 50 decibels each. The total decibel I'm having a hard time speaking. The total decibel levels are not cumulative, and the most important factor with decibel levels is distance from the source. So according to the information that I have, the maximum decibel reading on a warm Sunday would be 75.25 decibels right at the source. And decibel levels decrease by distance. So for the first 10 feet, the decibels decrease by 6 feet, and then they decrease by 6 every 20 feet after that. So it's approximately 100 feet from these proposed location of these HVAC units to the closest apartment building, which is the 3-story mixed-use building at the corner of Union Street and South Fullerton. So at the corner of that building, which is approximately 100 feet away, the decibel level would go down to about 43 decibels. And according to my college textbook, a decibel level between 40 and 50 is classified as comparable to a quiet street or an average home, and it's classified specifically as usual background noise. So in my opinion, 43 decibels is pretty low when it reaches to the corner of the closest apartment building. We've had in other towns, and particularly in Glen Ridge, they've stipulated that when the units are installed, the township could ask that all of the units are turned on at the same time, decibel levels are tested, and then the units could be adjusted. If the board asked for that, the applicant would be willing to do that.
Just, at least I had trouble the first time understanding this. Are you saying that as you add more units, it's not linear, that you don't get
Correct, it's not cumulative. Right.
Okay. So, would you sum up on the criteria?
Sure. As we've repeated, St. Luke's is continuing their quest or their mission to break down barriers, both within the buildings and on the site. The proposal will have no additional impact on the neighborhood or the zone. There are already 3 HVAC units in the vicinity, but they are not screened. With this proposal, all of the HVAC units will be visually screened. As I said, if the board requested the units, upon completion, the units can be turned on and the decibel levels tested, and modifications could be made if necessary. Due to the existing and proposed vegetation and the jog of the building, the units will not be visible from outside of this property. And for the first time, the lower level of this building will be made barrier-free accessible. And really, the bottom line is that St. Luke's can continue the mission that they've started of serving people in need, not only with food, but also with clothing. Thank you.
Any questions?
What's the decibel level at the property line? I think you indicated it was at the building.
Right, at the building, I testified it was 75.25.
I thought it was 75.25 at the source.
At the source, so I'm sorry, at the source,
So what's
correct.
the decibel level?
At the property line.
At the residential property line?
Oh, at the residential property line, not at the building. I only did it to the building.
Is it safe to say that between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. it's going to be less than 65 dBA?
Yes, yes,
And between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. it's going to be less than 50 dBA?
much less than 50, yes.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
So with the second time around shop, you'll be adding a new public entrance. You have an existing public entrance that you've described. Will that existing public entrance remain?
Yes, that will remain. John? Yes. just to confirm.
It will remain, but it will be less used.
And then near the new public entrance, there is a tree that exists according to the, and that tree will be removed, is that correct?
That tree would be removed, the existing Japanese maple.
Okay. Looking at page 1, I see that there is looks like it's a ladder that extends from the roof that perhaps is not exposed to public view for most people because of the existing tree. Now, when that tree is removed, does that ladder extend all the way down to the ground, or?
It does not, it does not extend all the way to the ground.
We'll just need you to come up to the microphone.
It does not extend all the way to the ground. I believe it stops at approximately, you can see the line, the bricks here. I know you can't, I cannot reach it, so at the bottom of it's at least 8 feet above the ground right now.
So is there anything that would prevent folks with mischievous intent to try to access that ladder?
There is actually, by moving the air conditioning units where they are now, it could potentially be climbed upon. I don't think you can get it, but it actually makes it less accessible by moving the air conditioning units.
And then the other question I have is, with the second time around shop, I'm wondering, do you from time to time have trucks or whatever that either bring materials in or remove them?
The only time that we have trucks is when we have stuff that we have not been able to sell. We have Vietnam veterans is who we end up giving it to, and the truck comes into the back of the parking lot because of the way we will load out through the other door is where we've loaded out in the past, and piled in the back of the parking lot. Once every 6 months at 7 o'clock in the morning usually.
And so you would anticipate that you would continue to do that?
Yes.
Thank you.
The new door, is it access just for the second time shop? Or
Yes.
will it be used for any other access in and out the church?
It's only for the second time.
It's only for the second time around shop that yeah, it doesn't lead to anything else.
And what were the hours for the shop again?
The hours that we've operated on are 10 to 2 on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, and 10 to 12 on Saturday.
And all of the times that entrance will be closed?
Other times the entrance will be closed, yeah.
Other questions, members of the board?
Just one other question. I noticed on page 6 that there was no lighting that was associated with the new entrance. Is that correct?
There is a proposed light underneath that slate shingled roof, so it would not be visible.
So it's not visible in the rendering?
Correct.
But it does exist. And so that lighting would not have any impact on neighbors in the building across the street?
That's correct.
Has any other ideas been promulgated concerning noise abatement around those air conditioners, besides the screening? I mean, that's not going to...
Right. There is a company that makes a protective cover that reduces decibel levels by 5.
Okay, now those covers for each unit?
Each unit, correct.
And they still operate
Correct.
sufficiently?
Yes.
And that would be
That-
purchased with the...
That could be purchased with the units if the decibels are too high. Right.
Other questions from members of the board?
Are there any members of the audience who have questions or testimony or anything you want to say about the application? I assume those are your witnesses. You want to sum up?
Yes, I will. I'm afraid, I think that Mr. Sarnas has done a very good job of it, so I'll try to move quickly. I think St. Luke's has presented compelling evidence in support of this variance. The core purpose is to provide barrier-free access to St. Luke's thrift shop. The topographic conditions and the unique character of the building present really serious challenges for providing barrier-free access to the second time around shop. It's simply not possible to provide such access through the existing entryway. Because of the slope of the land to the east, the proposed location of the new door is the best location for barrier-free entry. But in order to locate the door there, it's necessary to move the existing HVAC units because, as witnesses have said multiple times, and if you can see it, it's obvious that the HVAC units would be smack in the way of entry to the new door. Other alternatives were considered. For example, if the units were placed on a flat roof, they'd be visible. It would look worse, and they'd be very hard to service. And other locations are too far away for the units to function effectively. Regarding the benefits versus detriments, as we've said multiple times, this will be the first time that there's barrier-free access to the second time around shop. And I think the description was very good about how very, very difficult the existing entrance and existing exit are, even for people who are pretty fit. And for people with disabilities, it would be very tough going. The second time around shop obviously benefits the public in important ways. It provides low-cost clothing to people with limited income, and there are programs from time to time to provide clothing for job seekers, nice suit for an interview. And as people request it from Tony's Kitchen, or based on other types of requests, the clothing is given out free. I'd also like to emphasize what amazing volunteer opportunities the shop has provided for seniors. It's a place where they can go and give back, feel that they're contributing, and it's a place where they can break from their isolation and socialize. It has even provided volunteer opportunities for disabled young people. Also, the placement of the 2 additional units will provide an opportunity for air cooling to the basement storage area, which can then be used for Tony's Kitchen backpack programs. Reverend Manel briefly mentioned that this program keeps growing and they need more and more space, and this would provide space for that obviously beneficent purpose. From an aesthetic point of view, it seems the evidence would be that there's actually an improvement, because right now the units that exist are not screened, so you can see them from the east and in all their glory, but if they're moved, they're going to be beautifully screened with landscaping. I actually have difficulty seeing any negatives here. The sound level is an issue, but the technical evidence that was presented is that if all 5 units were operating at the same time, at the worst-case scenario in terms of the closest location of the mixed-use property across the street, the sound level would be 43 decibels, which is typical or usual background noise on a quiet street. And for those reasons, we request the board to grant this application.
Start with Ms. Harris.
I have no objections to this application.
Mr. Church.
I have no objections to the application, with just a proviso that additional sound barrier material be utilized, because over time, as we've seen with other applications, those units can get noisier. And I think with a padding or something that Mrs. Sionis mentioned would be appropriate. I would approve this application. I think it's a great thing.
Mr. McCullough.
I also am in agreement with this proposal, and just would want to make the additional statement of appreciation for the deep and obvious commitment to the common good that St. Luke's provides to the community.
Mr. Simon.
I'm in favor. I like it.
Mr. Caulfield.
I'm in favor.
I'm also in favor of the application. I think the applicant has demonstrated both C1 and C2 justifications for the variance. I don't think this will have a substantial impairment of the zone plan. Well, I don't think it will result in a substantial detriment to the public good. Mr. Sionis is qualified in many things. Being a sound expert is not one of them, and it's nice he looked at a textbook. And but I think and as Mr. Sionis is aware, with the church on North Willow, we imposed a condition that the units all be tested simultaneously on installation. I guess if you can just double check what we did, that the sound limits not exceed either the daytime or nighttime limits for the residential property line is the criteria, and and so that you have to one that will be checked then, but that we impose as a condition, in addition to the legal requirement, that they continue to adhere to the sound limits. I suspect it's not a major issue that other than, and most of the nighttime church services are in the winter, so probably a lesser concern with windows being open or anything, but but they should do that in case for whatever reason they're operating during the nighttime limits, which I think actually might be a little difficult to meet at the property lines, but we'll make them do that. And that they also adhere to the Historic Preservation Commission recommendations. Someone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the application with the conditions that were cited.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're going to take a break until 10:15. Mr. Owen, if you want to get everything set up and ready to go.
On the record.
Okay, the next application is that of DH Development LLC for property at 360 Orange Road. This is a continuation of the public hearing on the matter. Mr. Owen, just to note for the record, we are 6 tonight. I don't know if you have expectations of finishing tonight or...
I have been alerted to that, and is my microphone working? Good. I have been alerted to that, and we would like to try to finish tonight. We'll have to see how it goes.
Okay. You want to proceed with your next witness?
I will. For everyone, I'm David Owen. I represent the applicant in this particular application. The last time we called one witness, the architect. The architect testified, and tonight I have 3 more witnesses. I hope to move through them fairly quickly. I'd like to begin by calling David Beasley.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address, please.
David Beasley, B-E-E-S-L-E-Y, D.L. Beasley Engineering, 82 Golf Road, Bloomfield, New Jersey. By way of background, I have a... Let me start by asking you just a couple of questions. Are you a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I am.
Did you prepare the engineering plans that are before the board?
Yes, sir.
Would you please briefly state your credentials for the board?
Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from NJIT. I have been licensed since 1982. I've appeared before this board many years ago. I've appeared before some 50 boards throughout New Jersey and been qualified as an expert.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I offer Mr. Beasley.
License is current.
It is current. Yes, it is, sir.
Thank you. Would you please briefly, just by very brief overview, explain the existing conditions and the proposed improvement before I ask you a series of questions about the engineering plans?
Sure. We are at 360 Orange Road. This is a vacant lot. It slopes from the road up towards the back of the property. It is undeveloped. It is covered with trees and some underbrush. The proposal is to clear the site somewhat, create a driveway, a single driveway into the property on the right-hand side of the property, and construct two-family houses and parking and other site improvements.
Okay. All right. I would like you to go, first of all, if it's okay with you, right to the storm water and drainage management plan.
Certainly. Since the site is undeveloped right now, we have quite a difference between a developed site and an undeveloped site. We needed to create a detention system or a retention system that met all of the requirements of the state program. We went through several versions. The version we have now are 2 separate systems. One is in the area between the 2 buildings, and the second system is down towards Orange Road. They are recharge systems. They are retention systems as opposed to detention systems. They are also equipped with an overflow in the event that there was some excessive flow, and then that would simply trickle out and go into the existing system out in the street. The system in the street is relatively small. It's only a 15-inch RCP pipe. So this meets all the requirements for the 2, 10, and 100-year storms, stores that water, creates the recharge, and meets the stormwater requirements.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move to a different topic. I'd like to have you comment briefly on site distances, and by that I mean the view that one has when they would be coming to the end of the driveway, looking to the north, looking to the south.
Very good. As you know, this is on somewhat of a curve in the road. I went out there and I made observations as to how far down you could see. You can, if you were looking towards the north or as you are exiting the property to the left, you can see up to the split in Orange Road, and that is approximately 370 feet. If you look to the south, to the right, you can see approximately 330 feet. Now, what do we measure that against? This road is posted at 25 miles an hour. Conventionally, we up our analysis by a little bit, so we looked at the 30-mile-an-hour speed, the braking distance it would take at a 30-mile-an-hour speed. That's 200 feet. So we are in excess, the sight distance is in excess of that, so we meet the sight distance requirements.
Okay, the next thing I'd like to turn to is what I'll call the tree plan. There were a number of questions the last time requesting that we be more specific with the trees that we are going, what the condition of the existing trees, what we're going to remove, and what we're going to replace them with particular reference to Montclair's tree ordinance. Would you please review that for the board?
Mr. Chairman, I have some handouts that are smaller copies of an exhibit I want to talk to. How do I go about that, sir?
What we're going to do is mark it as A2. And then you're going to hand out, I guess, which are reduced copies of what we just marked out as A2.
That's it.
Yes.
Do I hand it to you in the back?
Right here.
Thank you.
Did you keep one for yourself?
I did.
Good.
It's not my first rodeo.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to wait till they're all the way around. Actually, before we go to the trees, I want to pick up another area where there were questions the last time, and this has to do with the placement of trash cans and how you move from the trash can to the curb to put your trash can there. Is that illustrated on A2?
Yes, it is.
Would you briefly review that for the board?
All right. You know what? Do I need this? Or
Yes, if you're going to
All right.
stand. And you have to turn it on, too. Fools me every time.
Tech. We need tech.
We need Graham.
There he is. Here he is. You're in the back monitoring all that, huh? Thank you. On the handouts that I just gave you and on this larger plan, in the back of each of the units, there are 4 units, four dwellings, you can see a 2 square figures on each one. They represent rolling garbage cans. Typical household rolling garbage cans. One can be trash, one can be recycling. There can be an extra one if the unit, I don't know, drinks more beer than I drink. And they are in the back of the houses, conventional, and during trash days, they would simply be rolled out, down the hill, to the street, picked up, and then returned by each unit owner.
Okay, so there's now a sidewalk path from the trash cans around the building, and for the building that has units 2A and 2B in it, the path would simply continue through the parking lot to the sidewalk and then down to the street.
That is correct.
Okay.
So
Now,
it's complete sidewalks. You don't have to go across any landscaping or anything.
now I'd like to go to the tree plan. Would you review
Okay.
that, please?
Yes, I made a field inspection of the trees. They are illustrated on the left-hand side of the figure A2. There are 28 trees out there, all right? 10 of them are not in good shape. They are split. There are missing leaves. There are dead or very distressed trees. Other ones are good. They're good trees. For the development, though, we are ten of the trees are going to be removed. 10 of the good trees are going to be removed. So 8 will remain. So you have the 10 dead trees, we're going to take out 10 more trees, 8 will remain. And we're going to add 10 trees onto the site, and they are illustrated and called out on the color version on the right-hand side of figure A2.
Under the area called plant schedule.
Yes, in the upper right-hand corner.
Okay. And do all those trees correspond with trees that are approved in Montclair Township?
Yes, they do.
Huh? Okay. So I think I do not, at least now, have any more questions for this witness.
Questions from members of the board? Mr. Owens, who's going to address the report that we received from our consulting engineer?
Mr. Beasley can do that.
I guess what I'm interested in is...
Do you have a particular item?
I think what I'd rather say is, there are a number of items that I think the board engineer asked that you comply with. If you have an issue with one of them, you should talk about that now. Otherwise, I'm going to assume that if this application is approved, they would become part of a condition as part of the resolution.
Okay, maybe I can help to expedite this. I have a copy of the report in front of me, and I'll try to lead you through it.
Okay.
The technical comments begin on page 1. Comment 1 is that we need Essex County Planning Board approval, and we agree to that. Comment number 2 is that we need Hudson Essex Passaic Soil Conservation District approval, and we agree to that. We will address the variances in a few minutes. Comment number 4 has to do with refuse and recycling, and we propose not to comply literally with 281-8.1. What we propose to do is to not have a multi-family trash collection, but to have a one-family style trash collection, as was just reviewed by Mr. Beasley. Number 5 has to do with the fence height. I'm getting a little ahead of this, but if you look at this property, the two properties that adjoin on either side have an existing 6-foot tall fence that goes up a portion of each sideline. We are proposing to continue that in order to match that fence height the entire way around the property, the remainder of the sidelines and the rear property line. That fence height is okay once you are past the extreme rear corners of building 2A and 2B. But between that rear corner and the existing fences next door, we're proposing not to be the 4.5 feet that the ordinance requires, but we're proposing the 6 feet to match the adjoiners. We just think that that makes sense and causes a better look. The next one is number 6. The comment in the report is that we're only required to have 6 parking spaces, so why not have 6 parking spaces? We're looking for 10 of them because instead of providing 1.5 per unit, we think it makes sense with the 2-bedroom unit to have 2 full spaces for a unit. When you can do this, sometimes you can't do it, we can. And then we thought we'd have 2 guest parking spaces on site, so something that these days is hard to do. Comment number 7 has to do with ADA standards for accessible design. And if I recall from the last meeting, the building is not designed for ADA accessibility, and therefore we proposed that the parking not be. If
That's correct.
I don't know how to state that more succinctly. Do you have something to add to it?
No, the units are not required to be ADA accessible, and they do not trigger the parking requirement for that.
And I think that comment number 8 goes right along with that, addressing ADA accessible routes, since the dwelling units do not need to be like that.
Right. Storm
Okay. All right. Number 9 is a very long comment. We did review the drainage plan, but I've noted that at the bottom of comment number 9, your board engineer has accepted our design. He says at the very bottom, which is an acceptable methodology. So we agreed to number 9. We've complied with number 9. I presume we'll do a percolation test under number 10?
Yes. We will.
I presume we'll provide a maintenance plan under
Right.
number 11. We have designed a plan that does not negatively affect neighboring properties on runoff, so we'll comply with number 12. I think we're okay with number 13, coordinating all the utility service with the utility providers.
Yes.
You have to answer number 14, a Y connection versus a different connection, a saddle connection.
If the municipality wants a saddle connection, we will provide a saddle connection rather than a TY.
Okay, and please address number 15. He's requesting a certain foot candle intensity.
The lighting level we have provided is typical of two-family houses. It is not an apartment complex. Apartment complexes would, you would typically provide higher light levels. We wanted to keep this very residential, not a commercial parking lot, and elected to keep those light levels at a lower level. That's the reason for the design. It is not an oversight, it is deliberate. So we stand by that. And in the front, is this talk about the front as well? I'll add it anyway. In the front, there is an existing street light, which right at the light yields about 9 foot candles, and at the driveway would be 3 foot candles. So it would be quite well lit, the driveway itself where it intersects Orange Road. Very safe.
I should ask you, have you prepared a drainage report as part of the application?
Yes.
Dated June 13, 2019?
Yes.
Do you care to mark a copy of that? Or
It's been submitted as
It's
part of
been
the
submitted
file.
with the plans. I think that covers the board engineer's report.
When you're describing the accessibility of tenants to their garbage units in the back, I note on this drawing, is there accessibility for pedestrian traffic? These walkways go just to the apartments, but only to A1 and A2 from the street. There is no walkway going back to the other 2 apartments in the back.
No, you would walk as you would walk in a typical parking lot right behind those 4 cars. We have not defined a separate walkway in the back of those 4 parking spaces.
Why not?
Because it's just 4 parking spaces and it's a simple walkway.
One thing we could do, if you're interested, is we could put a paved walkway behind those 4 parking spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4.
I believe
We could do some brick pavers and...
That would be a visual cue.
And I believe that there's already depressed curbs,
And
and we'd rather do that than invade the landscaping.
Yeah, and then some lighting to aid people at night, may not have cars
We-
that are coming to visit. from one building
We can
to
add a
the
little bit of lighting there, too.
My question is the applicant going to testify tonight, or the architect?
Last time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I viewed the video, but I had a question that wasn't answered, so.
I mean, if
hopefully-
you have a question, we'll try to answer it.
Okay. Just why are 2 buildings proposed here as opposed to 1?
Okay, we have a witness coming up
Okay.
who will address that for you.
Just a question with respect to the refuse. Did you examine how that is being treated by the properties on either side, since those also represent multiple housing units? I mean, how are they managing that?
I did not. We looked at this as to how this facility will function. It's just going to function as two-family houses.
I mean, because the potential is that you you could have twice a week having 8, or as you indicated, some people might choose to have 3 cans, so you might have a deluge of cans that are out on the sidewalk all day long, frankly, if people are commuters into the city or elsewhere. I'm just wondering.
Yeah. I can tell you that in some other cases where we've had this, we have had no problem calling the, I forget the name of the department of Montclair that handles it. I've spoken with the gentleman several times, and we ask him, when does he come, what does he take, and we coordinate with them to make sure we're doing it the way that they want to do it. So we can, in some way, fashion that as a condition, if you think that would help.
I do.
Okay.
My question is really about the parking again because it seems like Unit 2B is being shortchanged. They have the longest walk through a lot of concrete. Since you do have parking spaces to spare, why not reduce parking space labeled number 5 and give it kind of like a matching view that Unit 1A has, just so they're not bombarded by concrete and, impervious surfaces. It would also give it a nice symmetry between the 2 units as well.
So I think I understand what you're saying, and I want to make sure he does. You're saying, can you make Unit 2B have the same look as Unit 1A?
In the sense of, eliminate parking space number 5, just to give it a little buffer from all the concrete that it's surrounded by.
I'll have to look to my client for that.
I think we can afford to lose parking spaces.
Okay, we don't want to lose parking spaces, but we think it's a good suggestion, and we'll do it if that makes you feel better with getting rid of some of the impervious area that's at parking space 5.
Yeah, and again, I think that person 2B is being shortchanged again with the long garbage walk and not even a walkway, as Mr. Church stated. So, give them a little something back.
Okay.
Other questions from members of the board? Let me, since Mr. Owen started with the stormwater, I'm trying to understand, you have a couple of type B inlets which are going into a pipe. I'm trying to figure out how, and then you have the retention system as to how the water is getting into the retention system. The one between the 2 buildings and the one in front of the front building.
Fair enough question, sir. I'm referring to site grading, utility and drainage plan, which is S3. How this operates is we do have a few storm inlets. The inlets go into a diversion chamber. The diversion chamber sends the water into the retention basin. They look like sort of look like a Quonset hut. They're made out of plastic, they're underground, you won't see them from the surface, but that's during construction. The water goes in there and sits there. As the water level builds up, should it build up, it can go back to that diversion and overflow at a very slow rate into another pipe, and then that's the pipe that goes down to the city system. But that's only in extreme rain conditions. These tanks are designed to hold the 100-year storms. So the 2-year and the 10-year storms, water level is much lower. So it's a chamber under the ground gravel bottom, the stormwater comes down from what looks like a typical inlet, goes into that diversion, goes into these tanks, goes into the ground.
Let me try again. Let me do the type B inlet that's behind Unit 2B. I assume the site grading is going to direct water from the west of that into
Correct.
that inlet. Okay, then it goes from there
To that manhole.
to the manhole, and describe the path of the water from there.
Then it goes down into this diversion chamber here, inlet B. That water goes all the way down into the system closer to the street. That's what that diversion chamber is, down by the street. The roof drainage goes into the upper system.
Okay, so, and so basically, all the water from the parking is going down to the diversion chamber at the front of the property, and the overflow from that is designed so it goes from there, not to the street, but to the, I'll call it a basin. I understand it's under the ground, but trying to read your elevations. So it
Goes into a detention system, a retention.
retention, you testified. And, okay, I want to, I guess, understand what you're saying about the lighting. I mean, you're kind of, the application is trying to have it both ways as to, well, you're asking for a multifamily development with multifamily parking. It's not how, single-family homes, two-family homes don't have 10-space parking lots. But you're saying you don't want to meet the lighting requirements of the ordinance, and I'm not understanding the rationale of that.
Again, we were trying to keep it on a more of a typical pair of two-family houses, light intensive. The board wants more light?
No, it's a, the rear parking, once you leave immediately behind the cars, people are going to have to walk in that area to get from there to whatever unit they're going to. Basically virtually no lighting. There's lighting in the parking area, but the area they'll be walking.
We are willing to increase, I'm in a generous mood tonight. We are willing to increase the lighting if you think that would help the project. And that's because you're talking about raising the foot candles to a certain degree.
Well, the ordinance requirement is to have a foot candle, which is hardly bright.
Yeah, that's right.
That's, not an atypical ordinance requirement.
Yeah, the typical lighting level for safety is a half-a-foot candle. A half-a-foot candle, for those of us who remember driving a car that didn't have automatic, push button and the door's open, half-a-foot candle is sufficient for you to find your key, find the lock on the door and open it. And you can't really read a book by a half-a-foot candle, but it's a safe lighting level for traversing a parking lot and for getting into your car. That is a typical light level, and we can guarantee that.
Right, that's why I'm not understanding why you're not doing it. It's a very dim light, but it is what is considered a safe level, so you can see your foot in front, where your foot's landing in front of yourself.
Okay, we will stipulate that we will have a minimum in the parking areas of half a foot candle.
Okay. And I am also struggling with your rationale as to why you're not providing handicap parking. And again, you're doing a 4-unit development, you're providing 10 parking spaces, and I know if you were doing a 2-family, you wouldn't have to do it, or a single family, but that's not what's being proposed here, and I'm not sure how legally you justify not doing a handicap space, and I'm not sure practically why you don't want to have a handicap space.
I'm sorry.
In terms of handicap space, it would have to be close to the...
Yeah, so
that would be one on the side. I don't think you should use true
Okay, so I believe we can do a handicap space. That means that we would lose, of course, both of our guest spaces, but we would still be providing 2 per unit, which is something we'd really like to hold with. I just think it's a convenience, but what we can do is, there is, if you'll recall from the last time, there is a striped area at the west edge of the parking, and I think that between that and a parking space, that would give us the ability to put in the handicap space, and we will do that.
I mean, the handicap space would normally be required to be located in proximity to the units.
We will do that.
Yeah.
It has to be proximate to
And
the entrance.
and let me, just so I understand what you're saying is, how many, would you end up with 9 total spaces, 8, 2 per unit plus the handicapped, or just 8?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes, that's what that would be. We would have 8, 2 per unit, and then the handicap space, and the other parking space, the one which is now number 5, we would remove because we would be taking that impervious area away from that unit that's furthest in.
And moving on to the trees, okay. So you have, I guess there are 2 trees that are labeled as distressed, and I want to understand the rationale why under the ordinance you don't have to replace those trees. Where are you drawing the line as to what trees need to be replaced in terms of what the ordinance requires?
They're not viable trees. They're,
So we'll donate the resident trees as part of the tree ordinance.
my client has just advised me that per the ordinance, we can make a contribution for the other trees. So those trees, those 10 trees that are dead, dying, or distressed, we will not ignore those. We will compensate for those under the, I think it's a $250 per tree section of the tree ordinance. So we will comply fully with the tree ordinance.
Then the okay, so that, because you also have this category of tree not viable, which I'm not sure why that's different from the distressed trees, but if you're going to comply with the ordinance, we'll skip over that. Then you have, there are 4 trees towards the rear, well, 3 on the property, 1 that's at the property line, but the 3 on the property that are being proposed to remain, one of which your parking area is going partially under the drip line of the tree, and I'm assuming the area of disturbance will go even further, closer to the trunk of that tree. What measures are you going to take to ensure that tree remains viable?
I have to defer to my client. We'll probably retain, some tree experts, because these are sizable trees, and we would want them to survive.
It appears to me the one option would be to relocate that tree to the west, on the other side of the other tree that's not as close to it, if we're talking.
My guess is that, given the proximity of the trees and what I'm assuming is the size of the trees, just generally looking at the property, there's no way that tree can be relocated and survive.
Not that tree.
No, I meant a new one to be planted.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. The tree
Right.
that you're flagging is a
Can't
tree,
pick that-
is
you
a
can't
tree
pick
that's
that
an
a little
existing
bit.
tree.
Right.
And then, I have the same concern in terms of construction impacts of the tree. They're the paired trees at behind building Unit 1B, that, again, the walkway is going under the drip line, and I assume the construction disturbance is also impacting, and it's just this exact same issue in terms of making sure that tree remains viable, and if it doesn't, that it will be replaced.
Well, if the number of trees increases that we have to take down, we would still comply with the tree ordinance by replacing those with another tree. And we wouldn't know that until we went through construction.
Right.
So for those 3 trees that you have identified, if for some reason they don't make it, we will comply with the tree ordinance and replace them.
So I'm going through the other comments of the engineer to make sure I don't have other questions. Any other questions from members of the board? Are there any members of the audience who have questions for this witness? Okay, you want to call your next witness?
I will.
Thank you.
Joseph Steiger, please.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth of the matter pending before the board?
Yes, I do.
State your name and address.
Joseph Steiger, S-T-A-I-G-A-R, 245 Main Street, Chester, New Jersey.
Are you a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I am.
And do you have particular training, knowledge, experience in transportation, including traffic engineering?
Yes, and I've appeared before this board in that capacity.
If you recognize Mr. Steiger, then I would offer him as an expert.
Your
in
license
traffic
is still
engineering.
current?
My license is still current.
Okay, we'll accept it.
It's been a while since I've been here, but I have.
Okay, and I have one, maybe 2 questions for you. I know you're going to be brief. Would you please explain why you were retained to appear here and what issue you looked at?
Yeah, this is probably one of the easiest traffic studies I've been involved with. We're dealing with a very low volume of traffic. The reason and the focus of my presentation is that we are asking for a use variance. We're asking for more units than what we're allowed. And you'll hear reasons for the planning reasons from our planner. But in terms of traffic, the 4 units that are 2-family homes, two-family homes, consisting of total of 4 units, and comparatively to a single-family home, would have a net increase between 1 and 2 vehicles per hour during the peak hours. Yeah, so those are hourly rates. And as traffic engineers, in order to measure intensity and impacts, we look at peak hours, and I'm sure you've heard from other traffic engineers as well about the peak hours and the analyses that are performed for that hourly rate. So again, 1 to 2 additional vehicles per hour on Orange Road would not have any perceptible impact, in my professional opinion, at all in the operational conditions along that corridor.
I don't have any further questions.
Questions from members of the board? Just I just have one question. The safety of cars making a left turn out of the proposed driveway, is there any issue with that?
You heard from Mr. Beasley about
Right.
sight distance. That's the paramount issue in terms of a safe ability to make those maneuvers, and we have more than adequate sight visibility. I'd like to point out we need county planning board approval, and the county engineer will be looking at that same aspect as well.
Okay, just, I mean, Mr. Beasley, indicated the speed limit was 25 and he used 30 miles per hour. Did you do any observations as to what speeds cars travel on Orange Road?
Not measuring them, no, I haven't. But that is typical of a 5-mile-an-hour increase. But if you heard the numbers that Mr. Beasley presented, even though we have for 30 miles per hour, you need 200 feet. We have an excess of 300 feet. So we're in the order of about 35 miles per hour that we have more than adequate sight visibility.
Any other questions from members of the board? I'll call your next witness.
Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Steck, please.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Peter G. Steck, S-T-E-C-K, 80 Maplewood Avenue, Maplewood, New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I offer Mr. Steck as an expert in professional planning, given the number of times.
Assuming his license is still current, we'll accept him.
Yes, it is still current.
I would like for you to review the factual background that is relevant for your analysis. I know we have a few exhibits to mark along the way, and at some point I'll ask you to identify the variances, and we'll address the positive and negative criteria.
Perhaps it'd be worthwhile to pass out the exhibits now?
It's a great idea. Why don't we do that?
Okay, we're going to mark this as A3. At least if you have more than one, we'll do it consecutively, but is this just one exhibit?
It's one exhibit with multiple pages.
All right, we'll mark that as A3.
For the record, I'll briefly describe what A3 is, and then I may refer to it as I'm going through my testimony. A3 was prepared by me today. It consists of 3 pages, but 5 sides. At the upper right-hand corner of each page is P1 through P5. First page is an aerial photograph where I've superimposed the property and approximately where the dwellings are going to be placed. The bottom of that is a photograph taken by me this morning. The second page is additional photographs taken by me this morning with the title on each one, 3 through 5, saying what they are. Page 3 is standing at approximately 10 feet back from the curb where the driveway is going to go, and photograph 6 is looking in a northerly direction and 7 in a southerly direction. 8 is a panorama view from Hollywood Avenue looking toward the subject property in a westerly direction. Because it's a panorama, it's somewhat distorted, but it gives you the whole panoply of uses there. The next page has several panels, a portion of the zoning ordinance, the site plan, and the floor plan and front facade. And then there's a portion of the tax maps on P5, and then at the bottom is the zoning map. So back to the beginning. This is a long and narrow property, 75 by about 314. It is vacant. As described, it is wooded. It has been vacant for a long time. There's no evidence that it's ever been developed. It's owned by the applicant for a number of years. There's a sign on the property. It is being marketed. In my discussions with the realtor, it's been marketed, I believe, by the same realtor for slightly over 2 years. And you can call her to affirm this, but There's been no interest from any callers in developing the property as a one- or two-family dwelling. The interest tends to be for multiple buildings, multiple units, such as 6 units, but there has been no interest in over a 2-year period. Orange Road is a county road. There's no parking allowed on the street, hence we're sensitive about having parking on the property. You have a pretty good description of what is being proposed. It's 2 separate buildings with 2 units each. The front building is in scale a single-family house. It's 32 feet wide, it's got a porch. Someone driving down the street is not going to know that this property is, my opinion, that it's built, developed with a building other than a single-family home. When you look at it from an angle, you will see the building behind it, but the prime view of this straight on is of a single-family home architecturally. The applicant has elected to have 2 buildings rather than one 4-unit building because it makes each building, first of all, nicer. Each unit has more windows now. They have windows at least on 3 sides for the unit, so there's a nicer unit, and it's scaled to be a smaller building. And again, it's set back to meet the alignment of the supportive housing buildings to the north. The building coverage is 14.2%, which is somewhat less than the zone maximum, which is 25%. And as indicated by earlier witnesses and as illustrated by the photographs, there's good sight distance when you're exiting the property both to the north and to the south. I looked at the surrounding area and
Let me just stop you for 1 second.
Okay.
You're going to refer to the characteristics of some of the properties on either side of this property, correct?
Yes.
And were you able to get those characteristics from municipal records, including property record cards and the most recent resolutions that this board issued?
Yes.
Okay. I think it would probably be a good idea to mark those right now. I'll hand them over to you guys. Since the facts are coming from me, or some of the facts are, this would be A4, and that would be the property record cards for 364 Orange Road. Okay?
There's only 1 copy.
Oh, I just have one.
Okay.
You can pass it around. This second one, which is A5, will be the board's resolution for 354 Orange Road, dated August 18, 2010. And this one is the board's resolution for 340 Orange Road, dated February 16 of 2014. Of 2014.
February 19.
February 19, thank you. I'm sorry, please proceed.
So I think the best photo to look at is the first photo on Exhibit A3. This is a Google Earth photo from May 23rd, 2018. And as you can see that the property is framed by, on the south or left side, a multifamily development. The building permit card says that it was built in about 1950. It consists of 3 separate buildings that are 2-story garden apartment style. To the very rear, there is a freestanding long building that has garages. So that building has clearly been there for a long time. We don't have evidence of exactly how it was approved, but the answer is it's been there since the 1950s, and it contains 38 units. And that calculates to a density, and I include that on the last page of A3, of 21.13 dwelling units per acre. Going to the north, the next property over that abuts this is the supportive housing property. That was actually denied by the board, but reversed by the court. And that consists of 2 buildings with 6 units each. So that and each unit is technically a dwelling unit, so there are 12 units on that property, and that amounts to a density of 9.48 dwelling units per acre, as I referenced on the 5th page of my Exhibit A3. So that one, again, was approved by the court and subsequently constructed. Further to the north, there's the largest property in the area is the Montclair Senior Housing property. That's developed at 30.3 dwelling units an acre. The building is predominantly 3 stories. Before I go there, I wanted to emphasize, to the south, the garden apartment is 3 principal buildings. To the north, the property is developed with 2 principal buildings on the same property. The senior housing is 1 building on a property, but at the highest density in the area, it's 30.3 dwelling units per acre. That was approved by the planning board, even though today it's in an R1 zone. When that was, and that's all subsidized housing for 62 and over, when that was approved, the zoning ordinance was specifically amended to make it a conditional use. And the applicant filed with the planning board, got approval, and then a number of years later, the governing body removed the conditional use provision after the building was built. So it is in a single-family zone, the same as we are today, but it was specifically legislated to be developed there.
So all 4 of these properties are in the R1 zone?
That's correct.
Okay.
So, and across the street, well, Orange Road is county road. You've got to be careful crossing it as a pedestrian because there can be a fair amount of traffic. But these properties are fairly isolated from the surrounding area. If you look at P5, the last page on the exhibit, you can see that to the rear of the property are very deep lots that access Pleasant. To the south, because of the alignment of properties there, it's likely the Hitchcock Place was developed at one time. Across the street, there is a different character, but mostly single-family homes, and they're shown on photos 7 and 8 on the 3rd page of Exhibit A3. And a number of the lots, while there's no density in the R1 zone, if you divide our lot by lot area by 4, it's equivalent to a lot of, I think, 5,788 square feet. So a good share of the lots on the other side of the street are actually more dense than we're proposing, although it's technically a little bit of a different zone. It's a single-family zone across the street, but that's a 60-foot lot width, and we're in the R1 zone that is a 70-foot lot width. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the zone permits a single-family house that can have up to 25% coverage, and it is a conforming lot, although unusual because it's sandwiched between higher density uses and uses that are multiple principal buildings. So I want to describe the variances that we need. The first 2 bring this board jurisdiction. We have a use, 2 family houses in a zone that only permits a single detached home. So that's a D1 so-called Medici case ordinance. Because we have 2 buildings on the lot, that's also a D1 variance. So that's what brings us before this board and why we need 5 affirmative votes. There is a maximum permitted fence height behind the rear building. We can be 6 feet, but because there are two buildings, we want to extend the fences toward the front. And again, there are existing fences on either side that are approximately the same height. So we do want to have continue that theme of privacy. There is a provision in the zoning ordinance that says you can't have more than 4 vehicles in a single-family zone, and that's because the ordinance anticipated 1 house. So they said you can't have more than 4 cars for your single-family house. Well, we are not proposing a single-family house. RSIS would require 6 spaces. We're, as of the latest amendment, we're proposing 9 spaces. And I think it's significant to have a little more because no parking is allowed on Orange Road. And as you know, some of the traffic is, you have to be quick on your feet to cross it, at least certainly during the more busier times. So we need 2 D1 variances, and we need a dimensional variance for the fence. I suggest that we could certainly physically put up a 4.5-foot fence all around, but we want to match the aesthetics of the existing fencing and provide some privacy between the units. So I think there is a C2 variance where the benefits outweigh the detriments. There is also, again, the limitation on 4 cars, a maximum, was intended for a single-family house. We have 4 units here. They are small units. They each have only 2 bedrooms, but it's clear we need 4 parking spaces to accommodate it. And again, there is a convenience as well as safety issue because you can't park on Orange Road, and it's not necessarily easy for a pedestrian to cross it. Because this is a Medici case, we have to show that certain purposes of the municipal land use law are advanced. As special reasons, we have to show that the site is particularly suited, and we have to meet the negative criteria under the enhanced burden of proof. The negative criteria being that this can be approved without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantial impairment to the zone plan and zoning ordinance. There are, before I get to that, I did look at the master plan. Your current master plan did not study this area. The master plan concentrated on commercial areas and the residential areas by train stations. And in the introduction to the plan, it says that they're not reviewing any of the residential zones in this. But I pick up the theme from it in that, first of all, on the South End business area is discussed on as one of the special areas on page 117 of the plan. And it described the area as having, the area was developed late. In fact, across the street is Canterbury Park, which was, I guess, one of the last public parks developed. And it characterized the area as having smaller lots, creating a higher density neighborhood. I would note that this is in convenient walking distance to the neighborhood commercial area. It is kind of a classic planning philosophy to encourage pedestrian interaction, to have higher density uses where there's an infrastructure that can accommodate it, and where there are goods and services. So this is an attractive location for any kind of housing. And in fact, the ordinance allows up to 28 units an acre on top of the stores in the neighborhood commercial area, recognizing there's a benefit to having a residential population that takes advantages of those goods and services. So there, in my opinion, there are several purposes of the municipal land use law that are advanced by this as special reasons. Purpose A talks about encouraging the most appropriate use of land that will promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Again, just taking the theme from the state master plan, there is a state interest and a public purpose served by having housing close to goods and services in an appropriate location. Purpose E talks about promoting established population densities. As I noted on the 5th page, This is a density that is lower than any of the 4 largest properties that frame this property. If you look at the census data, a 2-bedroom townhouse produces on average 2 people per unit. So at least from the census point of view, this development could have 8 residents there. The lowest density use in the area, we have 12 units next door, which is essentially 12 people. So we're even, if you wanted to measure it in people per acre, we're even lower than that. And obviously the concentration is a lot lower than the senior citizen development with 100 units and the 38-unit Willamere Apartments. Purpose G talks about sufficient space in an appropriate location. This is sufficient space because we meet all the setbacks. We're 14 and a fraction % building coverage, whereas 25% is allowed. We put the front building back so it's in alignment with the 2 supportive housing buildings. And again, we could have had more parking. We're now down to 9 spaces, but there's enough space clearly to have nice green front lawn, landscaping and the like. Purpose I talks about promoting a desirable visual environment. And again, I think the architecture and the positioning of the building speaks for itself. Despite the fact that this stretch is dominated by multifamily use, this building is going to read as a single-family dwelling. And finally, Purpose M talks about encouraging more efficient use of land. And again, this is from a pedestrian point of view, a valuable parcel because it is in convenient walking distance to the South End Neighborhood Commercial Zone. And again, it's both a benefit to the residents here to be able to walk there, and obviously a benefit to the commercial operations there because they'll have some additional customers. We have to show particular suitability, and I think that relates to the size of this property being long and narrow. If this were short and squat, potentially it could be subdivided, but subdivision would produce an even narrower long lots. This is particularly suited because it's sandwiched between 2 multifamily developments that are higher density and have higher populations than the subject property. This, frankly, will look most like the single-family house. The supportive housing to the north, while they do read as single-family houses, they're, in a sense, supersized. This one is only 32 feet wide, which is typical for housing in this area. And again, the architecture, I think, is designed to be compatible. We have to address the negative criteria. In my opinion, it meets the negative criteria, even under the enhanced burden of proof. In terms of the impact, we've already talked about stormwater runoff. We're aligning this building with the buildings to the north in terms of front setback. This will have code-compliant parking and maybe 1 or 2 extra spaces, but in my opinion, that is needed to better assure that there isn't on-street parking. The site issue at the driveway has already been discussed, as well as the increase in traffic. So from and there also is a storm drainage system, as already discussed, that would be reviewed by the board's engineer. So in terms of detriment to the public, in my opinion, there is no substantial detriment. The last point is if approval would substantially impair the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. As I said, the master plan didn't really study this area. You have to go back to the '87 master plan. But clearly this area has changed over time. There was a legislative introduction of the senior housing. In 1950, the Willamere Apartments were built. The property to the north has been developed with supportive housing. This is, in a sense, caught in the middle, and I think you can understand why it's not likely to be developed with a single-family dwelling. The In your annual reports, the Board of Adjustment didn't recommend that this be rezoning. The master plan didn't recommend it that be rezoned. But that doesn't mean it isn't appropriate for a variance. And in fact, I would suggest to you that granting a variance in an appropriate situation strengthens your zoning ordinance. If you told me that, why should we change? Well, first of all, we're not changing the zone. By having a variance here, you have better control because you can put conditions on it. If we put a single-family house on it, you know, we don't go to any board. We just get a building permit. That's, in my opinion, unreasonable, given the density and the character of the development on either side. By approving a variance in an appropriate situation, in my opinion, you strengthen the nature of the zoning ordinance. If you were to tell me, because this is a single-family zone, the only thing you will accept is a single-family house on this property, in my opinion, you weaken your zoning ordinance by doing it. The purpose of this board is to accommodate unusual situations, because otherwise, without variance relief, zoning would not stand. Here's a situation that has changed over the years. In my opinion, it is perfectly reasonable for 4 dwelling units to be here. It is one of the lower density developments that is in this stretch. You might say, well, why don't you just ask that the property rezoned? Well, it's not going to be, one could say that these 4 lots could easily be their own zone. So what would you put them in? I suppose you could put them in a 2-family zone, but everything would still be non-conforming. Well, how about a 3-family, an R3 zone? Let's put it in an R3 zone. That allows 18 units an acre. I get more units out of that. If you put this in an R3 zone, first of all, 2 of the properties would already be substandard in the R3 zone. So someone would say, the municipal land use law requires that zoning be drawn with reasonable consideration to the character of the district.
Excuse me, explain what you mean by 2 families would be 2 propies would be substandard. In the R3 zone?
In the R3 zone, they would still be non-conforming because they're over the density that would be permitted. The only density that would be a little more comfortable would be the R4 zone that allows 28 units an acre. So in my opinion, there is not a zone today that accommodates this. If you wanted to be the most conservative approach legislatively, you could say, oh, I'll make this an R3 zone, and while, you know, only one of the properties would comply today, let's keep it that way. Well, the answer is that would give me more housing units than I have today. That would give me 18 units an acre or 10 units an acre for townhouses. So that, in my opinion, gives evidence of the reasonable nature of this development. The principle here is to have development that's appropriate for the area. By separating it into 2 buildings, we have nicer units, more windows. We have additional privacy. We have buildings that are smaller in scale. Each building here approximates the size of a single-family dwelling. This, in my opinion, is not at all close to usurping the power of the governing body on rezoning. If the governing body wants to rezone it, it's going to be an R3 or an R4 zone, and that means we're permitted to have more units than we have today. So that doesn't make any sense. This is, in my opinion, a perfect fit for a variance situation, because the granting of a reasonable variance is the action that, in my opinion, preserves the integrity of the R1 zone.
Did we mark your handout?
Yes.
We did, A3.
Okay, so then the tree plan, I thought the tree plan was was A2. A3 was the handout? Okay, and I got 4 is 365, 5 is 354, and A6 is 340, those numbers being Orange Road addresses. I'm sorry, thank you, I have no further questions. I'll let it come out right now. I'm sorry.
So you discuss the properties along Orange Road. You did not discuss the properties to the rear of this property along Pleasant Avenue, there are about half a dozen properties that are probably deeper than this lot.
They're like 340, 350 feet deep.
And why don't those property owners also get to come in and say, we have these very deep properties, we should be able to do multiple units on the property?
First of all, that, while it's in the R1 zone with the 70-foot width, there are a whole slew of properties that are have the same characteristics, and they're developed with single-family homes. They're not on a busy street. They're not sandwiched by uses that are higher density uses that are multifamily and multiple principal buildings. So there's a whole different set of facts. That is really a different neighborhood. To get there, you have to walk a long way, up through the business district, up Cedar, around, and then back again. So from a land use point of view, they're remote, but they're a whole different set of facts. This property should not be granted variances simply because it's long and narrow. That's one of the features of it. If this were short and squat, perhaps it could be subdivided, but that makes no sense. So I think there's a dramatically different set of facts that apply to those lots.
If I were a planner representing an owner of one of those lots, I'd say to the rear of our lots is all multifamily with...
But the influence on those lots, first of all, the houses are way up in front, so the influence of that multifamily is at least 100 feet away from those houses. The influence area is maybe 50, 60 feet wide. Our influence area is 314 feet on one side and 315 feet. So if you measure influence by the length of where properties abut, the majority of the perimeter of this property is multifamily, and those properties, they have a width, they're affected by 57 feet, and their houses are 100 feet away. And again, there's a consistency in development there. That is conforming to the R1 zone. In our area, completely different situation.
But then, going back to you're explaining why you did not think a rezoning is appropriate, you're looking at that from the point of view of what the existing zones in the town are.
Yes.
Is there any reason the township could not create a new zone that would make the properties more conforming and would impose requirements that would control the density based on the lot frontages and other criteria like that?
It would, first of all, I think it would be attackable by spot zoning. But how would you draw?
Okay, let's stop there. I can point to probably 50 other zones in the town that are smaller than this that are based on what the existing pattern of development is. And I would argue strenuously that those no different than this are not spot zoning. They're reflecting what the character of development
Well, the
is.
character of these 4 lots, which I think could potentially be another zone, in order to make them conforming, you would have to have a zone that accommodated 9.48 dwelling units an acre.
Okay, but
so that would permit our development. I don't know how the town would create a zone.
And I'm not trying. I'm questioning how you go about developing this lot, not whether inherently the development is appropriate. I'm not saying this lot should only have a single-family dwelling on it. I'm questioning whether the appropriate way to go about allowing greater development on the lot is changing the zoning or going it through a variance.
This is the reason why well, first of all, to change the zoning is a discretionary, it's like asking the governing body, would you make my street one way? That you can't mandate that they do it. It's a discretionary, and it's
understand
not a
that.
requirement.
But it's, it's how land use policy decisions should be made, and it's a question whether this is a site-specific or whether it's a policy decision as to this area no longer is appropriate for a single-family zone.
But in your past annual reports, there's been no recommendation for rezoning. The current master plan admittedly did not look at the residential zoning. It's been this way since at least the 87 plan. This lot, the whole R170 zone that includes this area and on the other side of Pleasant, that's about 33 acres. So this property amounts to like 1.5% of the area of that zone. It doesn't make sense. I think it would be very difficult to design a zone that would accommodate these 4 lots. I think this is an excellent example of where a variance can be granted because of the specifics of the situation, and essentially it now this is the only vacant lot in the area, so this essentially is probably the best thing you can do to preserve the current zoning, in my opinion.
Do you think it's accurate to compare the density for the property to the north, where in effect you have 12 studio apartments, that are designed for single-person occupancy, are not designed for 2 people, and to treat that dwelling units per acre is the same as the dwelling units per acre that you're proposing? And
well,
saying
the
this is less
municipal land use law.
I understand that. Okay,
talks
go
about
ahead.
density, and it's units per acre. The Census Department, the Rutgers study about school-age building populations suggests that in, let's say, townhouses with 2 bedrooms, on average you have 2 people per unit. So that means statistically you might have 8 people living in this property. That's lower density in people per acre than the property to the north.
I don't think that's correct. I mean, your property is about 1/3 the size of that.
But I'm talking about people per acre.
Yes. So
and all I'm saying is to the north, there are 12 units for single occupancy, right? That's 12 people.
But not straight single occupancy, just anyone can go in there.
That's correct.
And with provision for a variety of mental health services that is not.
So in one sense, it's more active because you have people there 24 hours a day that are staff. You have professionals visiting there. There's an intensity to the property that is greater than just the dwelling units per acre.
Okay, but without going into a philosophical discussion as to the court's view versus the board's view, it was approved based on it being an inherently beneficial use, not based on the density being appropriate for the property. Is that correct?
Well, it was approved because I think the applicant met the statutory criteria. The board said, if I recall from the court's decision and the resolution, the board said there's not enough parking and it's a rezoning. And if I recall the judge, he said it is not rezoning. And the judge looked at the fact that this was, interior. He looked at the whole zoning of the town, and anyway, the judge concluded that it did not constitute an usurpation of the legislative function.
Okay, but was not the decision based in significant part of the use being an inherently beneficial use?
That was clearly part of it, but the answer is, and I happen to testify on that application, the answer is that it met the negative criterion. Now, I'll grant you that it was a Sika case, but still, from a land use point of view, again, you add to the, if we just look at intensity, yes, there are fewer cars per occupant, but there is also a service component here that adds to the traffic and activity.
in terms of portion of the lot that is impervious for that lot versus for this lot, what is the difference?
Do we have an impervious coverage limit? I mean, a calculation? We don't.
But isn't that in terms of, looking at the intensity of development of the property, isn't that something that should be considered?
The impact of impervious coverage, in my opinion, is aesthetic and stormwater runoff. We've addressed the stormwater runoff. Most of our paving is to the rear, so someone looking at this property is going to see what looks like a single-family house with a driveway on the right-hand side. So from an aesthetic point of view, you're not going to have any sense of the pavement, and if you recall, the lot slopes up and then levels off. So you're going to see a single-family house, what you think is a single-family house, and a driveway. Behind that is the parking area, and again, it's important to have enough parking, in my opinion, and in fact, this board granted a variance to the senior citizen housing, even though it was non-conforming. You allowed additional parking there, because again, you don't allow parking on Orange Road, so that's part of, that's a public purpose to having adequate parking on a piece of property.
But, that was based on the need for the existing use. I mean, it was not...
And in my opinion, the parking spaces were proposed are needed, especially because they don't allow on-street parking on Orange Road.
Consistent with your argument that you're making this look like a single family, what is the justification for the fence variance?
It is, well, first of all, there are fences on both sides. There are solid fences that are approximately 6 feet in height. So we want to match that. It's aesthetics.
So you have two fences running right next to each other?
I think no, we are continuing the fence. For example, the fence line on the supportive housing doesn't go all the way to the back.
Same with the others.
And so we're supplementing. We're not duplicating what's there. We're supplementing the 6-foot fencing. It just so happens that we have a building that is a second principal building, and your code was anticipating just one house on a lot, and the code said, okay, you can fence your backyard up to 6 feet, but it wanted an open front yard.
Okay, so why, following that logic, I'm not understanding why in front of the first unit you need or the logic of having a 6-foot fence.
If you look at Exhibit A3 and the photograph below it, on the left-hand side, you see the fencing associated with the garden apartments. There is already a 6-foot fence in front of the garden apartments. We want to continue that line to the rear.
Can I try to help? Right here on this property line, the south property line, there's a fence that's here over the apartments. We're proposing to start where that stops and to take it back, and it can be 4.5 feet to here. We're asking for 6 feet in that area. We can be 7.5 feet all around here, but we're asking for 6, and then what we're doing over here is you'll see new fence, existing fence on the north property line. It's 6 feet already all the way down here, so we're not doing any double fencing. We're just continuing at 6 where it's not 6. Did I get that right?
I'm just trying to close the rest of the property.
If you go, so you're saying there, the garden apartment fence goes back to the rear of the jut out, and then it just goes over, and there's no fence beyond that?
It looks like, if I can trace it, it comes up like this and it comes over and hits the building and sort of bullpens off a front yard area, more or less. We're going to pick up where it stops, okay, and we're going to take it back this way. And then the transition is very clear on the north property line because it happens to say new fence pointing toward the rear and existing fence pointing toward Orange Road, and that fence goes all the way down to Orange Road.
So, in a normal single family, and I mean, your justification is purely, even though it's a relatively small stretch of the 6 foot, is that entire distance from basically the front of the first building to the rear of the second building, where 4 feet would be required, that you get to do that, distance, which is 2 to 3 times longer than the existing fence on the neighboring property, is 6 feet instead of 4.5 feet.
I mean, there's no reason for those abutting properties to have any privacy issue because there's nothing on this property. The fence works for both users, and again, it was designed for a single-family house for the very rear of the property. In this case, we have 2 principal buildings, so technically the limitation is at the rear end of the second building, strictly according to the code. And that would suggest, well, there's a 6-foot fence by the neighbor, and then we drop down to 4.5 feet, and then we go up to 6 feet again when we get to the rear, which doesn't make any sense to me. And it's just because the fence regulations were intended for a single-family dwelling.
Well, what are the fence regulations for multifamily dwellings?
I'd have to look at them up. But the answer is the 2 multifamily uses on either side of us for privacy have 6-foot fences. For the garden department for the front half, for the supportive housing for mostly where the building is. Our buildings have, if you recall, decks to the south side, so we're sensitive about our neighbors, and we want our neighbors to be sensitive about us. We want some privacy. So it's not a hardship issue. We could put a 4.5-foot fence there, but it decreases the privacy for both parties.
I think to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, I look at 34727, and it says in all zones except RO, ROA, and C2, and then it's the same provision that we're dealing with, an interior lot.
And that's what I was driving at. There's the fact that it's multifamily doesn't magically justify a higher than 4.5-foot fence. In fact, for multifamilies, the requirement is for the 4.5-foot fence other than the rear yard.
You're correct I'm educated about what the code said for multifamily. It's just that it happens that we're framed by multifamily, and both of them have 6-foot fences for privacy.
One along most of the property line, and I'm actually curious on the facility next to your property as to why they stopped where they stopped.
I don't know.
But
I mean, part of it is, again, to keep in mind that there's nothing on the subject property. So, I mean, that fencing looks somewhat newer. I don't know if it was a replacement on the garden department, but they don't have to really buffer anything because there's nothing on our property.
On the garden department, I'm not sure at all what it was doing because clearly screening wasn't the purpose. I suspect the fence connecting to the building was probably just trying to keep people from walking
Well,
back and forth through.
I walked through there, there's a gate, not locked, maybe it's for pets, who knows what it's for.
It's certainly not anything to do with privacy. I don't
Well,
know what it's doing.
I can't answer that, but...
Okay. Any other questions from members of the board?
Just since the court decision came up, I happen to have it right here. I think we should mark it A7, make it part of the record.
A7 is the transcript of the decision of Judge Lombardi on Mental Health Association of Essex County versus Township of Montclair, dated June 2, 2011.
Other than I'm probably going to ask a question about it when I see it. Are there any other board members who have questions for the witness? Just bear with me a second. I guess the question I have, which I didn't ask, what is the justification for two families versus three families, one family, one family? How do you get the result of two families as being what is appropriate?
Well, as I understand the responsibilities of the applicant under the municipal land use law, it's not, you have to propose one application. And any application you've had before you, I'm sure, could be cut in half. And it would have less of an impact if it was cut in half. The responsibility of the applicant is to show that there are special reasons and that given the proposal, the negative criteria are satisfied. If I can satisfy or demonstrate with substantial credible evidence that the statutory criteria are satisfied, in my opinion, that application warrants approval, despite the fact that we could have put it 2 more units on the property and maybe still had an argument. But the answer is, I think the statutory criteria are satisfied. I think that it is a very reasonable project. Again, there's been no interest in any developer for building a 1 or a 2 family house on the property, which is, I think, understandable for a common sense point of view. It's not the job of the applicant to give you 12 different options. We have one application that we've thoroughly studied, and I think it meets the statutory criterion.
It wasn't, I was actually going either way in terms of, would your argument be different if they were proposing 3 two-families?
I think it would be a tighter site. I think it fits very naturally. Again, I've studied this use. There may be a more intense use that's possible and justifiable, but I don't need to go there, in my opinion. Again, if this were an R3 zone, we could do 18 units an acre. That would be 9 units. We could put 9 units on the property in a garden apartment style. We could do 6 townhouses. And that zone, and if the R3 zone were placed there, all the existing units would still be non-conforming. 1 unit would be conforming, but it wouldn't fit the area. You would need a more intensive zone or a specialized zone. And I don't know how you do that because there's such a wide array of uses here.
So the property to the north, could that have been subdivided and built with 2 single-family dwellings?
You mean where the supportive housing is?
Yes.
I don't know. I haven't studied that. The answer is that it's there, and it's going to be there for a long time.
What, do you know the width of that lot?
I can find out.
Bill, are you done with the court decision? I'd like to see it.
Okay, I was actually going to a question on it, but
That lot is 175 feet frontage on Orange Road.
okay, so could it be subdivided?
If there was nothing on it,
No, I understand. I'm going back to,
well, when I analyze this, I consider that to be an existing development that's not going away.
I have no problem with that. That's not where,
Okay.
but one of the things that the court relied on in its decision was, it was looking at it as an acre lot that the proposed development, not a population that would be much greater than 2 single-family homes on the property, which is what could have occurred anyway. And it's saying it's a difference, and it was looking at the context of it as the Sika balancing versus Medici balancing.
Well, I thought the prime issue there was that there was an attack. The reason the board denied it, if I recall correctly, was that the board felt that it constituted an usurpation.
That the inevitable result was we were going to get this application.
Well,
That
the answer is it was approved, it happens to be by the court, and that is, and that was approved even though there was a vacant lot next door to it. That was still considered not a legislative action, but appropriate for a variance. That's another factor which frankly suggests that a variance is appropriate for the subject property. It's a change since that decision. You know, first you had the garden apartment, the Willamere, then you had the senior citizen housing. Then the third item to come in was the 12 units of the supportive housing. Those are all changes to what would have been a single-family zone. This is no longer a single-family area. And regardless of how that got approved, it's approved and it's there and it has a land use impact.
Okay, but I assume you don't know what the zoning was when the garden apartment was built.
The evidence that I see is that there's no evidence that that was in a multifamily zone.
You don't know
Well, in those days, it was 1950, there are no municipal records, we tried to get them, there are no municipal records. At that time, it would have been a recommendation to the governing body, so if it was a use variance, it was a recommendation, so the governing body must have endorsed it at that time.
But you don't actually know that.
There is, all I can say is we could find, first of all, the municipality has no records other than the building
Property
card
record
that was
card.
introduced as evidence. And to the best of our knowledge, in 1950, this was still a single-family zone.
The senior citizens was built as a conforming conditional use in the
Yes, there
R1
was
zone.
essentially special legislation introduced that then disappeared after several years.
Other questions from members of the board? Are there members of the audience who have questions? How do you wish to proceed? Do you have any other witnesses?
I don't have any other witnesses. I'd like to take about 2 minutes to confer with my client. Is that okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back on the record.
Back on the record. We're going to do what most applicants do when we're short the seventh person. So what we'll do is, I have no more witnesses to call. I do have a closing statement to make, but I think I'll defer that until October. And I think we can wrap it up at your meeting in October. When is that meeting?
October 16th.
16th.
Just so Are there any members of the audience who have any testimony or anything, comments, anything you want to say about the application before we end the public hearing, other than Mr. Owen's summation? Okay, so this matter is being continued to the board's meeting on October 16th. There'll be no further notice. I don't know if we need an extension of time, but...
You'll consent to an extension of time?
Extension of time, you can have it.
And the only thing for that meeting is we will hear Mr. Owen's summation and then discuss and vote on the application, and we will do our utmost to make sure there are 7 eligible members here to act on the application.
Okay, thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We collect those.
Oh, yes. You're number 42.